If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
Have you ever experienced something paranormal that scared you so much you wished it was just a bad dream, and you're sure no one would believe you if you told them?
The demon in the closet. This was a few years ago. I purchased my childhood home with my husband. During the first couple of years, a toxic roommate lived with us and often pitted us against each other. Over time, he became depressed and stayed in his room constantly. Eventually, he found a boyfriend and moved out. I wasted no time turning the spare room into guest quarters. I started having horrible insomnia. To allow my husband to sleep undisturbed, I moved to the guest room. This is where things got dark. I finally found a healthy sleeping pattern that was working for me and getting real sleep. That's when the nightmares started. A clown was in the closet, but not any clown, a demonic, evil, twisted clown. I am not afraid of clowns in the slightest. He kept telling me that I was to be his bride and that I needed to kill everyone I loved in order to bring him fully into this world. In my nightmares, I found myself planning with him and agreeing to his demands. I would wake up, and the closet door, which had been closed and latched with an old school hook and eye latch, would be wide open, and everything in it disheveled. I feared the ex-roommate's depression had opened a doorway for darkness to enter, as he was in a vulnerable state when he occupied the room. After weeks and weeks of these nightmares every night, I decided to cleanse the house. I opened the front door and burned sage. My husband and I both have indigenous ancestry, so the burning of sage is a cleanse our ancestors held sacred. I started in the attic, making certain the smoke touched even the darkest corners, and cleansed room by room. When I began in the spare room, the light bulb exploded, the doorknobs rattled, and I did not stop. I pushed until I felt the energy leave the house. My husband, who was outside with our dog, knew when it was over. I never said a word because he saw the darkness shoot out the front door. We've had no issues since. The nightmares stopped immediately, and the closet door remained closed and latched. But I will never forget the hopelessness and darkness I felt in those dreams. I will never know why it showed itself to me as a clown. When I was around 12, my mother had to go out of town for a bit, and she left me home alone for a few days. We lived close to relatives, so it wasn't a big deal back then. She refused to give me a mobile phone because she figured she could just call me on the landline if anything came up. She told me the date when she'd be back, and that was that. The date arrives, and I hear my mom knocking on the door downstairs, calling my name. My dog, who loved her, got excited when she heard her voice and ran down ahead to greet her. She got to the door, freaked the hell out, and ran back upstairs to me. I refused to go down and open the door. The phone started ringing, and the knocking stopped. I picked up the phone to hear my mom say, "Hey, I'm sorry, I have to stay one more day here. I'll head home tomorrow." I grew up in a house on Lick Road in Cincinnati that was a complete poltergeist, from our cabinets and front and back doors all being open in the morning when we would wake up, shades all going up and spinning one at a time, to a rotting death smell upstairs where my room was a certain time of year, to snakes shedding skin on my bed, as well as a wolf being in our living room even though both doors were shut and locked. Another strange thing, we had a room where the walls would be completely, and I mean completely, covered with ladybugs. You couldn't even see the wall, and my mom would just vacuum them up like nothing. I was a teenager at the time and remember thinking, how the hell is she so calm about this? Even worse, I was pushed down the stairs while carrying my newborn son by some unknown force, and then, after hearing noises all morning upstairs that sounded like furniture being dragged across the room upstairs, my dad opened the door to upstairs and yelled, "Hey, you dead shits, calm it down up there." The house was built in the 1700s and had dumbwaiter elevators in it, and the rumors were it used to be an old cat/adultery house with secret passageways in some of the creepy rooms. Later that night, my dad yelled that the house had caught fire. It turned out that the house had caught fire twice before, but it was never completely destroyed, and people always felt compelled to rebuild it. Once we finally left the house, we all experienced vivid nightmares of a dark entity that had wreaked havoc on innocent children. The house puts a hold on its victims until you finally break free 20 years later. Paranormal experience I still don't understand. This happened to my family a few years ago on vacation, and I still think about it. I have a large family of 8 people of varying ages and experiences. 2 years ago, in the summer of 22, we spent a week in rural North Carolina in a cabin on vacation. The very first day we were there, we felt like something was off or wrong about the place. Everyone was feeling the same way, just like someone was watching us anytime we were in the house. The first night we were there, all the of-age folks, including myself, got pretty drunk and were just having fun. Most of the young adults and our parents migrated outside to use the hot tub, while a few just sat at the picnic tables, maybe around 10 p.m. We were just having a good time when suddenly we heard from the woods behind us a feminine voice say Marco, and of course, my sister-in-law says Polo back towards it. My stepsister and I are immediately broken out of our drunken states and are freaking out because this place was so secluded we had no cell service, and something just spoke to us out of the complete darkness. My father tried to laugh it off as he was also pretty drunk, but everyone ended up getting really freaked out and going inside. There were goats on the property, and for the rest of the week they acted strange and wouldn't come up to us anymore like they did when we arrived and would scream like they were being murdered in the middle of the night. We heard knocks on the walls through the week, especially at night. Any idea what it might have been? The whole week was just as weird as the incident. This place was insanely secluded on the side of a mountain in NC. We still talk about it to this day, and no one has come up with a better idea than a skinwalker, but I just don't think I buy that. I got a good one. I was about 19. Young and dumb with friends. It was about 2 a.m. and drizzling. We snuck into an abandoned asylum. Between the fence and the first building were about 100 yards of dirt and grass. Past the field were old sheds that once housed farm equipment used by workers at the asylum. We quickly ran across the field and reached the sheds. I start to get chills and ignore it. We move past the sheds and onto a road that leads into an alleyway. The alleyway leads to some stairs and an archway that connects two buildings. We are walking down the alleyway between these two-story buildings. I take notice that there is a basement. The broken windows at ground level, leading into pitch blackness, confirm my assumption. We reach the stairs and climb them. We find an opening in a window and start to climb through. Randomly, we hear a chain clanking down the hall. Besides rain, there was no wind or draft whatsoever. We decided to ignore it, and my last friend was climbing in when we heard shuffling down in the dark hall. The chain grew louder. We shined a flashlight down the hall, and there was nothing. There was only the sound moving closer. We decided maybe tonight was not the night to go inside. We opted to explore the outside. By now, we are all spooked. We descend the stairs and return to the alleyway. We start walking around the building when, suddenly, the scariest, most demonic sound came out of one of the ground-level basement windows. It sounded like a mix of a demon and a pterodactyl. It made us all jump and scream. We shared glances. I was the more spiritual friend in the group. I knew it was something demonic, not anything human or living. My friends looked toward me with questions and fear in their eyes. I calmly said, "Yeah, that was not anything of this world. Let's get the duck out of here. Something doesn't want us inside. We should listen." Just then, there was a slamming sound against the window at ground level. My friend pointed a flashlight at the window. We could see nothing but an outline of fog in the shape of a handprint. It appeared as though an invisible force had struck the window, leaving the hand in place and causing steam to gather around it. "Run!" I screamed. The demonic scream echoed in the distance as we sprinted toward the boundary. As we crossed, I heard a buddy scream in terror. "What the duck is that?" I turned to see a huge figure standing in the field. It was wearing an old-time top hat and a trench coat. Pitch black as night. It followed us with its head. The only way out was toward this thing. We tried to go around. However, as we all move closer to this object, it dissolves into the ground. It simply melts into the ground. I screamed to my buddies. "Just go. Head for the fence." As we passed the area, I looked at the ground. The grass was about shin high, there was no trace, no muddy footprints. There was no way a person was just standing there. When we arrived at my house, we came to the conclusion that something strange had occurred there, which we couldn't fully comprehend. All we know is that the demonic creature residing there was unwilling to disturb its peace. We never went back to investigate, and a few days later, the place burned down. Creepy voices for years in GA home. So, I grew up in rural South Georgia and lived with my parents and several siblings on a large farm. Most of my family grew up believing in paranormal activity, mostly due to our Native American heritage. My dad, on the other hand, was a staunch non-believer and would always discount our encounters as hogwash or overactive imaginations. My mom said for years that she would be woken during the night by disembodied voices. She said that it would sound like a room full of people, where you couldn't hear a single conversation but could tell the overall mood of the room. The activity would heighten around pivotal times in her life, death of her mom and brother. For years, my dad would laugh it off and say he's never heard a thing, even after all the kids moved out. Fast forward several years later, and my dad had been diagnosed with large and small cell lymphoma and went through chemo, lost hair, and lost significant weight. I stayed with him around Christmas of 2020, and I vividly remember him telling me that he is routinely wakened by the same voices that he had discounted for decades. He said that he would check the house to make sure that no TVs or radios were running elsewhere because the chatter was so loud. He ended up passing away from cancer in March of 2021. Looking back on it, I wonder if the voices were warning or welcoming him to his final outcome. This is my first time sharing here. My brother and I were in a barn after dark. This barn is particularly kind of haunted, as it's next to an abandoned house where the two owners died and are most likely buried outside. We had permission to be here since our parents were friends with the grandchildren of these two owners. Anyway, on to the story. We were in this barn after dark to try and see some sleeping birds, since barn swallows live in this barn. Firstly, let me give you a layout of this barn. The second door is by the light switch, but it doesn't open, so we have to go through the dark barn to get to the light switch. So, after we saw some sleeping baby birds, very cute, by the way, do recommend, we decided to go through the barn to the other side to turn on the light switch. After we turned it on, we hung around for a while, basically doing nothing except for chatting. We eventually got bored, and I gave my brother my phone so he could use the flashlight once he turned the lights off to navigate through the barn. I stayed by the front door of the barn, waiting for him to get back. I suddenly hear him call my name nervously. Name? Yeah? I was just making sure you were here. I could tell by his voice that he was unnerved, but I didn't know what he was unnerved by. I then saw him fast walking through the barn. I thought nothing of it as we opened the door and left. We were walking home, we live close to this barn, when he suddenly turned to me and said, "Now that we're away from the barn, can I tell you something?" Yeah. I can tell when my brother is lying because he struggles to control his laughter and often breaks into a shaky tone of voice. He then tells me what he saw in the barn that made him so unnerved. While scanning the barn with his flashlight, he briefly illuminated a tall figure. He says it was around 7 feet tall, it was towering over him, and it had this horrific, lifeless face. He said it did have eyes, but no mouth. When he quickly shined the flashlight in the same location, nothing was there. That's when he said my name, thinking I was somehow pranking him or something. But when I told him I was by the front barn door, that's when he started freaking out. Another thing is, we both felt like we were being watched in the barn, but we really didn't think anything of it since you constantly get those weird feelings. When the lights were off in the barn, I felt this weird lightheaded sensation, but I didn't automatically go, "Oh, that's a ghost messing with me." That's the end of the story. Nothing really happened after this. I lived in an old 2-bedroom, 3-story walk-up for a time in my early 20s in Toronto. A few days after moving in, my roommate Mike chides me in the morning for banging on the wall that separated our bedrooms and pacing back and forth across the apartment at night. We simply came to the conclusion that either he was dreaming or the sounds were coming from other apartments, as I had not engaged in any such behavior. We agreed that it must have been nothing and left it at that, but this became a regular nightly occurrence. Shortly thereafter I started noticing at certain times in my bedroom the cloying smell of cheap women's perfume mixed with a damp, musty smell. Imagine an old person's clothes left on a damp, musty basement floor near a litter box that wasn't being changed often enough, and you get the idea. What made it even weirder is that I would be filled with a sudden, horrible sense of foreboding a few moments before the smell would begin. Mike flaked out and left only 4 months into our 1-year lease, which meant I was left footing the rent for the entire place until I could find another roommate. I had decided to try and sleep in his bedroom shortly after he moved to see if things would get better. The very first night I slept in his former room, I had an incredibly detailed and realistic nightmare of myself standing in the dimly lit bathroom of the apartment and cutting my own face with a large shard of glass while staring into the broken bathroom mirror. It was only broken in the dream. Soon after that I started to hear the loud bangs at night and the flushing of the toilet in the bathroom. Several times the hot water in the bathtub turned on full blast in the middle of the night. One of the freakier things that happened not too long before I moved is the time I was woken up by the TV blaring Poltergeist on City TV at about 2 in the morning. At the time, that channel would always play movies late at night, but it was eerie that my analog TV, which you had to manually operate with knobs, turned on by itself at full blast just when a movie like Poltergeist was playing. Experienced something terrifying after using an old evil eye bracelet. I, 22-year-old female, had a very horrible experience about 2 or 3 years ago. My boyfriend, 22-year-old male, and I had been dating for less than a year when this happened. My partner is of Latino descent, and I am white. My boyfriend's family are believers in the mal de ojo bracelets, or in English, the evil eye. They taught me that the evil eye in their culture is used for protection, like if someone gives you a bad look or if they look at you with bad intent or envy. They then taught me that if the bracelet becomes lost or broken, that means it has done its job and protected you. My partner and I were hanging out one day at his home when he came across an old evil eye bracelet that used to belong to him. He had lost the bracelet some time before. He asked me if I wanted it, and he said that it would protect me. From what I understand, someone can gift you their evil eye bracelet, and it should still protect you, even though it had a previous wearer. I accepted my boyfriend's offer and decided to wear the bracelet, but I didn't really believe in that stuff. I grew up Christian, and I still believe in God to this day and am fairly religious. I went home later that day, and I was living with my aunt and uncle at the time. My aunt and uncle are deeply religious, and so their house felt beyond safe most of the time. I never got any bad energy or negative feelings there, nor did I ever experience anything bad or paranormal. That night, I went to bed wearing the bracelet, with nothing really on my mind. I don't know how long I had been asleep or what time I woke up, but I remember waking up screaming and thrashing. I can't remember any previous nightmares or dreams prior to waking, but as I was waking myself up with my screaming and thrashing, I swear I felt something grabbing my arm, the arm that I was wearing the bracelet on. I remember that I was grabbing my arm as well as my other hand, almost as if I were trying to reinforce the other arm that was being grabbed. I think I had managed to shake off whatever was grabbing me at the time, because as I was really waking up, I suddenly felt something at the end of the bed, and with a hard tug, it tried to rip my blanket off of me. I held onto my blanket firmly, and it eventually let go. I lay there in the pitch black darkness with my eyes wide open, just staring at the ceiling until I felt it was safe enough to grab my remote control that turned my LED light strips on and off. I turned on the lights and saw nothing at all. I stayed awake for maybe 10 minutes just looking around and being on my phone. I fell asleep again. I don't know how I was able to, but I did, with the lights on, of course. I had never experienced anything like this, and there's no way I could have been asleep or dreaming still because I distinctly remember waking up screaming and thrashing and absolutely feeling something. Now, I don't know if something had been attached to that bracelet, or if it was just crazy coincidence or not, but it was terrifying, and I didn't feel comfortable going home the next day to sleep in my bed again. The bracelet remained in my home, but I had taken it off to shower and did not put it back on. I never experienced anything like that again, even though the bracelet remained in my home in my jewelry dish. If any of you practice witchcraft or are into the paranormal and culturally practice and believe in the mal de ojo, or evil eye, I'd like to hear your thoughts or speculations as to what you think could have happened. A child ghost in the new house. We are unsure if it's evil or not. So we are planning to move into this new house. My older sister, who sees ghosts, says that there is a playful ghost child residing in there. So we asked the carpenters who are currently renovating the house about the kid, and they were shocked. How did we know about the child? They mentioned that the child can touch objects, it opens the faucet. They began scolding the ghost, and the next day, they got a fever. The fever was intense and had already lasted for a week, so they went to a witch doctor. The witch doctor says that a child ghost made them sick. And the child ghost likes being piggybacked. My older sister mentioned that the child ghost seems friendly and keeps on smiling. The ghost child even escorted her to the gate and said goodbye. Normally, she said that it just keeps on running around the house and playing. My sister also said that the child ghost also holds my mom's hands when she visits the house. Now, we are unsure if we should continue moving into the new house. We are thinking about if the ghost is evil or not. What's your thought? This incident occurred to me and my best friend approximately an hour ago, and while we remain terrified, I feel compelled to share our experience. I and my best friend live in a small town in British Columbia, Canada, that has many forested areas. We practice Wicca, and were looking for a place to set up our altar and found an old cement foundation block down an old service road and thought it was perfect. While setting up and blessing our area, we heard lots of branches breaking but didn't think anything of it, seeing as there are plenty of bears and coyotes in this area. There was a very pungent, horrific smell, but again, we didn't think anything of it, as there is a sewage plant near that area. As we sat down, preparing to rid ourselves of the evil, the sounds intensified in frequency, causing us to become frightened and ultimately decide to leave. As we were packing everything and getting our bikes ready to go, the smell got worse, and something was moving just out of our sight. That really scared us, so we started to hurry and leave. We got on the service road and started biking to the main road. We were talking about what it could have been, and we made a joke about it being a skinwalker, and we started whistling into the woods where we were and laughing. As we rode past a clearing in the woods, I saw something move. I thought it was an animal, but as we passed under the streetlight, I saw its eyes were hollow and didn't reflect. Freaked out, I told my friend what I saw, and we raced home. When we got home, we were scared but thought it was over. I asked my friend to come with me to go to the bathroom outside. My friend stood on the porch as I walked into the bush beside my house. My friend thought it'd be funny to whistle into the woods around my house, and at first we laughed until we smelled that same smell as before, and something in the trees mimicked the whistle back, same pitch and beat. At first we thought it was my neighbor, but I didn't have any neighbors in the direction where it came from, it's only trees. Then another snap of a branch breaking made me jump out of my thoughts and book it inside as fast as I could. My heart is still pounding. This really freaked us out. I think my sister invited something into my house. I, 16 male, live at home with my mom, her boyfriend, and my sister, 17 female. My sister is a bit weird, she messes around with witchcraft and tarot cards, crystals, etc. As a Christian, I consider witchcraft as demonic and believe it should be left alone. However, my sister's involvement with black magic and other unfamiliar practices has led to strange occurrences in my house. My mom has been experiencing whispers in the night. I don't know what time these experiences happened, but she heard whispers that made her shoot up in bed, and I've also experienced the same. She never told me her experiences until I told her mine. I was struggling to get to sleep near midnight, and I felt uneasy. I was trying to sleep, and I became paranoid. I locked my door and sat on the edge of my bed when suddenly something whispered directly behind me. Its breath was cold and made every hair on my body stand on end. The back of my neck and shoulders shivered where its breath went. It made me shoot up in shock. It was a whisper that lasted a couple of seconds at the most. I couldn't understand what it said, but it sounded female. My mom said she thought the whispers were my sister until she woke up, a female whisper. My dog has also been acting strange, suddenly staring into dark corners of my house, not budging. This is a behavior he has never exhibited before. A couple nights ago, he began growling at a corner of the living room. My dog never growls or barks. These events are very recent and have begun occurring since my sister started messing around with witchcraft. The uneasy feelings and cold whispers shared by me and my mom can't be a coincidence, and my dog's sudden questionable behavior must mean something is in my house. The lady with no face. This is an experience I have thought of quite a bit in the past that I found out was a bit more plausible than I thought. I've been going through these creepy stories and finally feel like giving my personal experience. When I was really young, my family lived in a little area outside Houston, Texas. I slept in the top bunk of a bunk bed on the first floor, diagonally across from my door. Basically, when I looked out my door, I could see straight across the house, from the entryway to the living room to the kitchen, since they weren't separated by much wall. There were 3 nights I remember. The first 2 I wrote off as just my parents moving in the darkness. I would wake up in the middle of the night and look out my door. Due to the large windows of the entryway and living room letting in moonlight, I could make out the furniture and other objects. Suddenly, I could swear I saw a shadow moving across the living room, behind the couches, and into the kitchen. Now, I wrote this off as my parents since it always came from the direction of their room. It wouldn't have been much, if not for the next 2 events. The third night I remember seeing this shadow, it was right outside my door. My room was a little hallway with my door on one side and the bathroom at the end of it. The figure clearly moved from the bathroom side of my door and stood in my doorway, looking at me. It was a large black mass, not human looking at all. It was more of a bell shape with a flat head. My child mind did what it could only think to do, and I pulled my blanket over my head. I squinted my eyes and insisted for it to go away. When I opened them again, it was gone. I fell asleep soon after. Of course, once I was older, I debated with myself over if it was a dream or not all along. Now, here's the punchline. I was eating dinner one day after reading several creepy stories and whatnot, and it had me thinking about it again, so I asked my mom if she remembered me saying anything about it. I could have sworn I told her about it when I was little, but she didn't recall anything like that. However, she did recall the faceless lady. I had no idea what she was talking about, so I asked her. She was surprised I didn't remember. She said that she had left me sitting on her bed watching TV one day. Her room was huge, with a big walk-in closet and master bathroom. She came back later and said I scared her to death when I asked, "Who was that lady?" She looked around and asked me what lady I was talking about, and apparently, again, I don't recall this at all, I responded, "The lady with no face." She exited the closet and walked away. Now that I think about it, the shadow I saw all those times had a distinct bell shape, a dress, perhaps, but I could never remember what the face of it looked like. Do you think they could have been the same thing? Why would I remember the vague shadow but not meeting the lady? Or was it all just the dream of little kid me? That presence in my bedroom. Look, I never believed in anything. I was a hardcore atheist. It wasn't until I met my ex-mother-in-law that I started exploring spirituality. Nowadays, I see and feel presences. For example, in my sister's mother's house, I felt a presence, and I know it was like an old lady. The thing is, for the past few weeks, I've been seeing a presence. I see it. I don't see it with my eyes, but I know I see it. It's a presence surrounded by black smoke. Before, I had seen one surrounded by a white halo/smoke, and that one made me feel very safe. But this black one doesn't give me any sense of trust. I suspect it might be the evil eye or some negative energy someone has sent me, or maybe even a demon. I'm not really sure what to do because it's making it hard for me to sleep. It stands at the foot of my bed, and I believe it's watching me. What should I do? What am I seeing? 30 years ago, my aunt and a small group of friends decided to play a drunken game in the basement, summoning spirits for fun. They didn't have a Ouija board, so they improvised, a jug of water, glasses arranged in a circle, and tarot cards surrounding them. Nothing happened that night. But a few days later, my aunt went to bed and felt an overwhelming presence in her room. When she opened her eyes, a tall man dressed entirely in black, wearing a wide-brimmed hat, stood next to her bed. Paralyzed with fear, she bolted out of the house and ran to the neighbors, calling the police. They found no signs of forced entry. That was just the beginning. Over the following weeks, strange things happened. Keys hanging in the kitchen jingled on their own. Lights flickered in my cousin's rooms. The radio turned on by itself. The entire house carried a heavy, oppressive atmosphere, especially at night. One evening, my aunt asked me to babysit my young cousins. I agreed, unaware that this night would haunt me forever. At around 11 p.m., I was lying in bed when I heard the front door and the distinct jingle of keys. Thinking my aunt had returned, I got up to check. But when I reached the hallway, the door was locked. No one was there. Then, the TV suddenly blared to life, full volume static. I rushed into the living room, but the house was empty. The air felt thick, charged with something unseen. I told myself it was my imagination. I turned to check my aunt's bedroom, just to make sure she really wasn't home, and saw that the door was slightly open. The room was empty. Then, as I took 4 steps back toward my room, bang! The bedroom door slammed shut with a force so violent that the entire house seemed to shake. It wasn't a breeze. It wasn't a slow creak. It was as if an unseen force had violently thrown it shut in frustration. A deep chill ran through me. My heart pounded in my ears. I ran to my room and buried myself under the blankets, trembling. Moments later, my cousins came running in, terrified. They refused to sleep alone. I never babysat there again. Years later, when I was older, I finally heard the full story, the events leading up to that night and the things that continued happening long after. I don't know what they invited into that house, but whatever it was, it never left. I'd seen weird stuff before, like my deceased grandfather standing in a doorway appearing alive, well, happy, and dressed in a very snazzy white suit. But I would just blink, and whatever ghost I saw would be gone. I would just chalk it up to a momentary brain fart and move along. One night in 2005, though, when I was 18, I was chatting with some friends on AOL Instant Messenger. I told them I'd be right back and went out the back door to get my CD collection out of my car. It was around midnight with clear skies, a near full moon, and good illumination. I wasn't the least bit scared or nervous because I had done this literally hundreds of times before. My mind wasn't on anything the least bit supernatural. After I grabbed my CD case, I turned around to head back in when I saw her standing there near the garage at the front corner of my house. She was about 35, an attractive brunette with light blue eyes wearing an 80s-era peach-colored nightgown. Her body was facing away from the house, and she had to crane her neck at an uncomfortable angle to watch me. She kept playing with her run-of-the-mill crucifix necklace. She was giving me this maternal, admonishing look, like when a child disappoints its mother. If it wasn't for this slight, otherworldly glow to her, I would have thought she was a crazy neighbor. I thought, I'm seeing shit. I'll just blink, and she won't be there anymore. Wrong. She was still there, eyes fixed on me, playing with that necklace. I walked to the edge of our property line, about 12 feet away from her, and slowly made my way back to the back door. She never changed the orientation of her body, she just rotated her head like a sentry gun to keep me in her sights. She followed me with her eyes until I ducked behind the back corner of my house. When I got to my back door, I locked it up, shut the curtains, and proceeded to tell my AIM buddies all about what I had just seen, adrenaline pumping through my veins to the point it was difficult to type. I don't believe in ghosts, but I've never had a 30-second hallucination before or since either. I can't explain her away. A demon was following me. I have been listening to everyone's stories about their paranormal experiences, so I decided to share mine. I am a 100% believer that demons will attach themselves to you during your weakest moments. When I was 14, I was in a rough state. I was severely depressed, feeling isolated, and withdrawing from friends, family, and activities. My mom took me to doctors to try and help me, but nothing really worked. One day I had forced myself to go out with some friends. We decided to visit our town's closed-off park late at night. We walked through this wooded area and hopped the stone wall and just wandered around. It was a windy night, and we were on the lakefront, so you could hear the waves crashing on the rocks. I started to feel like something was following us. I kept looking over my shoulder, and I saw this tall, dark figure standing behind a tree. I continued to stare at it, curious to see if it would move. The wind was causing shadows to dance all around, but this particular shadow remained motionless. I asked my friends if they could see it, and they couldn't, so I freaked out and demanded we leave. After that night, I would continue to see the shadow for months to come. It would be in dark buildings my friends and I would go into. I would see it in my dreams standing outside my house. I eventually was checked into the hospital for a failed attempt. When I got out, I had a new outlook on life, but this darkness just wouldn't go away. I refused to sleep in my room but rather with my mom. I hardly ever went into my room anymore. My friend had given me his protection crystal to wear because he was concerned something was attaching itself to me. So the night the demon made itself known was also its last. I was sleeping in my mom's room and woke up out of a dead sleep. We have a streetlight outside of the house, well, two, actually. One lights up my mom's room so you can see out into the living room, and the other shines into it so you can see the bathroom door and the hallway in my room, all of which you can see from my mom's bedroom. I sat up and looked at the door. The dark figure was blocking most of the light. I couldn't see the hallway or the bathroom. I open and close my eyes, but the figure stays there. In that moment I remembered what my mom had always told me. Pray, and God will be there when you need Him. So I closed my eyes and screamed in my head, "You are not welcome. Go away from me. Leave me alone. Get out of my house." And followed it with a Hail Mary and an Our Father. When I opened my eyes, it was gone. I could see the hallway and the bathroom again. So I went back to sleep. The dream stopped. I stopped seeing it behind trees. I even started sleeping in my room. I never tried to harm myself again, and I eventually stopped taking antidepressants. I lived a normal life after that. Soon after all this, I met my now fiancée, and we have been together for 11 years, own a home, and have pets together. Actually, as I type this, we are on our way home from Disney World. I honestly believe something had attached itself to me in the darkest moments and caused all the bad stuff to happen. Tell me what you guys think. Thanks for listening. An evil spirit at the bottom of the stairs? About 30 years ago, my twin brother and I encountered an unknown dark entity in one of our childhood homes. My family lived in an old farmhouse in the middle of the suburbs. It was built in the late 1800s and it was the original farmhouse that stood on the land that all of the surrounding new houses were built on over the years as development ensued. We had only lived there a few years when this happened. Like many farmhouses of the time, all of the bedrooms were upstairs, sharing one bathroom. My parents were quietly asleep in one room, my younger brother in another, and my twin and I in the last. It was around 2 or 3 in the morning when I found myself very anxious and unable to sleep. This went on for some time as I could not shake the feeling that someone or something evil was at the bottom of the stairs. I could not see the bottom of the stairs, and there was no sound to make me think that, I just felt it. I felt cold, the air felt different, maybe dry or static. I had goosebumps, and the hair on the back of my neck was on end. My brother was asleep on the bunk bed up top. Yes, bunk bed still at age 13. Finally, I just had to say something. "Jordan?" I asked. He responded immediately, "What?" He wasn't asleep, he was wide awake too. "Do you feel like someone is at the bottom of the stairs?" "Yes," he responded. Gulp. I asked him if he wanted to sleep with me on my twin bed. He came down and lay next to me. I put a Bible under our pillow, and as Jehovah's Witnesses at the time, I said a quiet prayer. I said Jehovah loudly, though, we were taught that saying God's name was an instant demon exterminator. Lol. We eventually fell asleep and woke up feeling very awkward about cuddling all night. We moved soon after and didn't talk about it until many years later. I know nothing historically relevant about the house, but I can imagine that some shit went down over the many years leading up to my family owning it. I have no idea what we experienced that night. There is something evil in my house. Demonic activity high, please bear with me. I'm not crazy, and stuff like this never happens to me. I'm just really spooked. I have OCD, and every night I check things in the house, not important in the details. All you need to know is that I stand at the end of the hallway for a while before going to bed because I keep having to recheck said things. My husband told me of a dream he had, and it has me really freaked out. He isn't religious in the slightest and I am very new to my relationship with God, so this was very bizarre to hear from him. In his dream he was in someone else's POV, and it wasn't him. He was standing in our bedroom with his arms out directly to the side, and all he knew was that he was terrifying looking but didn't know anything else about this POV at the end of the hallways as me checking the things as I usually do. And he's watching me, waiting for me to turn around. He recalls flies being present before this POV, but can't remember the details. He woke up from his sleep, immediately felt the need to pray, and then went back to bed. He told me this the next day, and it has me shook. He doesn't get scared much, and he got chills when describing it to me. He's 6 feet 6 inches and has seen much worse stuff in person. I genuinely don't believe a dream would scare him this bad. There was no jump scare, no indication of anything bad happening except for the feeling of evil. Almost like he felt the evilness of it, But either way, I pray it's nothing. Also, I would like to note we moved into this house 7 months ago, and our life has been flipped upside down since. Skeptical. Thoughts? Thank you for listening and giving any responses/suggestions in advance. I heard my voice calling my name from another room. I live alone. Okay, so firstly I'd like to note that I do not believe in ghosts, demons, or any goofy stuff like that. I'm a pretty scientific approach kind of person and believe everything has an explanation, even if we've yet to discover exactly what it is. For instance, I believe in the existence of alternate realities, other dimensions, and parallel universes. That being said, here's what happened to me. I was sitting home alone watching TV. I don't drink or use any medication or recreational drugs besides a little occasional cannabis, which I had not used this night. When I thought I heard a voice coming from my kitchen. At first it didn't register with my brain that someone was speaking to me. Initially I assumed a device was playing a video or something. I have a small TV in my kitchen with a Google Chromecast plugged into it and also a tablet that was charging. Then I hear it again. Now it's obvious my dogs hear it too. They both look in the direction of my kitchen, ears perked up and eyes scanning the dark doorway. We all just sat and stared for a good 20 seconds, occasionally looking at each other. Confusion is coursing through every part of my body, mind, and soul. And I hear it again. Hey, come here. My first name, come here for a second. Now I'm in full WTF mode. I recognize it as my own voice, and my brain can't decide if it's really happening. It doesn't sound like a voice coming through a device's speaker, and I don't remember ever saying those words in the past. Why would I be calling myself? I don't even have any friends with my same name. I'm still frozen in fear, trying to make sense of what's happening. My property is surrounded by motion detecting cameras. There's no way someone got in my house without me knowing. Then once again from the kitchen I hear, come in here. Hey, my first name, come here real quick. One of my dogs responded to the come here and went into the kitchen. That prompted me to break free from the fear paralysis and grab my pistol. Now I have my .45 in my hand, and I'm watching my dog walk around the kitchen like he's looking for something. My full kitchen isn't visible from my position, but I hear his collar and nails. Then he calmly walks back into the living room with me and my other dog. And we hear it again. Hey, come here for a second, my name, come in here. Now both dogs go running into the kitchen, and I decide, duck it, I'm going too. The dogs usually follow me everywhere, so once they see me get up, they come running back to get behind me as I lead the train of curiosity into the darkness of my kitchen. As I approach the doorway to the kitchen, I reached around the wall to hit the light switch. Just before my hand made contact with the switch, I heard a weird whoosh kind of noise. The closest thing I can compare it to is the sound of a car driving past in the rain. It's not the sound of the engine, but rather the whoosh sound as the tires move through the rain. I got the light on and entered the kitchen only to find it vacant. Just me and the dogs. That was the end of it. Nothing of the sort has ever happened to me before that or since. It still perplexes me every time I think about it. I'll probably never know what the hell that was. I have experienced 2 inexplicable paranormal events recently. Important context, I'm an order chaplain for the Order of St. John, a 1,000-year-old Christian order. It is a part of my professional role to investigate and bless areas, people, or buildings that have reported spiritual activity. Usually it's not spiritual activity, it's someone letting their beliefs cloud their logical analysis. There's almost always a logical reason, but I digress. There are 2 of the best or least explicable stories I have. The first one is really simple. My wife and I were asleep, and there was a really loud howl next to her on her side of the bed that woke us both up. I thought it was the dog, but the dog was sitting there looking between her and me like it was confused. But we both heard a long, wolf-like howl right next to her. It was very strange. The other is probably the best ghost story I have from the job. I was blessing a house, and there was a stairway that switched directions in the middle. The client had a large mirror installed on the middle platform where the stairs switched directions. If I see, feel, or hear anything while blessing, I don't talk to the clients about it. The worst thing you can do as a spiritual professional is affirm their beliefs, because they will be seeking evidence to justify their beliefs so that they feel less crazy. I was blessing upstairs, and when I came out of the bedroom, the door of which was right off the stairs, I turned to go back down and saw a woman in a blue floral dress with really long, wet brown hair standing at the base of the stairs with her back to the stairs, facing the lounge. And it wasn't a brief moment, I was looking at them the whole time in the mirror going down the stairs toward the middle platform. I thought the client had a visitor come in that I hadn't heard, so I readied myself to greet them and ask them if I could get past. They had vanished by the time I turned the corner. I pretended to be blessing the stairs and turned around to look in the mirror, and nothing. I went back to the top of the stairs, nothing. I was talking to the client, I hadn't mentioned the woman, and I told her to tell me exactly what she thinks is going on and what she's seen. She listed off a few really explicable things that I noted and then said, "Oh, and there's this woman on the stairs who stands at the top of the stairs looking at me from the bedroom door. She has a blue dress and really long brown hair. I can't usually see any features on her face." That's probably the only moment I've dealt with. I've had plenty of this might be spiritual, but I feel like I'm just missing something moments. This was the most concrete one for me. If she had simply described it as she did, I might have mistaken it for hypnagogic hallucinations. But I saw it, and then she explained it. I still scratch my head, to be honest. Just to clarify, while I am a Christian chaplain, I do not strictly adhere to Christian methods, as I come from an indigenous branch of Christianity. Something haunted my house, and whatever it was is pure evil. When I was about 14, we lost my childhood home. My brother moved to live with our dad, my sister and her boyfriend got their own apartment, she was pregnant at the time, and I decided to stay with my mom and stepdad. My grandma owned the house we had been living in and lost it when she filed for bankruptcy. She didn't tell us this until the bank showed up to do an inspection and gave us 30 days to move out. My mom's best friend owned a house and said we could move in and fix it up. This place was seriously dilapidated and downright disgusting. Like holes in the floors, bug infestations, stained crusty carpet, and toilets filled with old poop. It hadn't been lived in for a few years, and the people who lived there previously, Mom's friend and her family, lived like pigs. Side note, my stepdad worked 12-hour days Monday to Friday, and my mom was severely depressed and addicted to prescription pills, Xanax, Klonopin, etc., and was constantly in a pill-induced slumber. The first month in the house was by far the worst. I couldn't sleep at night because I could hear muffled voices through the vents all night. I started sleeping with loud music playing. Every morning the basement door was wide open even though we closed and latched it at night because it had a serious spider infestation. We thought it might have been my mom sleepwalking at first until it continued to happen while she was in the psych hospital. All of my friends were too afraid to come spend the night again after their first night staying there except one because they said it was too creepy and they felt like they were being watched at night. My mom always slept on the couch because she couldn't be on the stairs after she took her pills and constantly said she could see somebody looking at her from the kitchen doorway. We took it as her hallucination until I saw it for myself when I stayed down to keep her company one night. The object was tall and entirely black, resembling a sharply defined shadow. I was completely paralyzed with fear. I physically could not look away until it walked out of the doorway back towards the other room. I confirmed my mom saw it and made her go upstairs. My boyfriend saw it a few weeks later when he was helping my stepfather fumigate the basement. He said it was just standing in the corner staring at them, and they pretty much noped the duck out of there. We lived there for a year after that, and I saw it twice more, and each time was just as terrifying as the first. My mom said she saw it every single night, even when she started sleeping upstairs again. When we finally moved out, we saged the house and put a salt circle around it. Within 2 months of living elsewhere, my mom got clean, and her depression got 1,000 times better. I later married the friend who owned the house's nephew and have been there a few times since, but it's too uncomfortable to stay there for more than a few minutes. That house is messed up. The construction of my house took place in 1904. It is a single-family home, a wood frame set on a concrete block foundation. I have been living here for about 12 years. This is my favorite of all the strange things my siblings and I have seen or heard in this house. This incident happened to my brother. About 10 years ago, my brother and his best friends had started a garage band playing mostly Spanish rock, alternative music but in Spanish. His friends could only get together on Sunday afternoons. They would practice into the early evening, they would usually call it quits by 8 p.m. This was the time I usually showed up and went to bed because I worked the graveyard shift. This happened in late fall, so the days were getting shorter. They had just finished a long session when the decision to head to someone else's house came about. My brother handed his car keys to his buddy so they could load up the equipment. Everyone had filed out of the basement. The tricky part was that they needed to walk all the way to the back of the basement, up the back stairs, through the kitchen doorway, down the hall, into the living room, and out onto the front porch. Everyone was outside sitting in my brother's truck waiting for him. My brother was walking up the back stairs when he remembered that he had left his pancakes in a to-go container sitting on a speaker in the basement. He made the decision to go back. Now the basement is not clean, with full sight lines, there had been partitions made, and the boiler and main heating unit are right smack in the middle. So after my brother walks back, he is about to retrieve his food container when out of the corner of his eye he sees it. It is a shadowy figure, right at his peripheral vision. This feeling of dread and uneasiness washed over my brother. We had been taught that if you are in the presence of a spirit or ghost and you feel a bad vibe, to say a quick prayer or to cuss at it. My brother chose the latter. He basically just told it, "Hey, duck you, I don't have time for this shit." My brother started to walk to the back of the basement and briskly up the stairs, closing doors and turning off lights as he was walking out. The last light switch is on the opposite side of the front door. Luckily the door was open and the light from the street lamp was flooding the living room with its amber light. My brother said he felt something at his back, but at no point did he turn around. As he flicked the last switch, the living room went dark, as did the rest of the house. As he stepped out, he pulled on the door, closing it behind him. I'm still holding his food container in one hand. He jogged down the few porch steps. He walked towards the front gate. Our house resides far from the main street, with a large front yard but no rear garage. As he closed the gap between himself and his friend's laden truck, he smiled and thought things over in his head, mad at himself for spooking out when there was no reason. He climbed into the driver's side of the truck, putting on his seat belt and getting ready to pull out of the parking spot directly in front of the house, when one of his friends asked, "Hey, wait, what about your brother? Isn't he coming with us?" My brother answered, "What do you mean? He went to work early tonight, he is already gone. Do you see his car anywhere?" The next question they asked was, "So then who was walking behind you when you were leaving the house?" Repeating encounters. This all occurred around the time I was in high school, and I honestly haven't seen anything with as much reoccurrence as back then, but when I was in high school, I shared my room with my younger brother. The upstairs was a 3-room portion of the old farmhouse we lived in, the main landing that was my parents' library, my sister's room on one side, and my brother's and mine on the opposite. Our room was laid out so that we both had twin beds, and mine was next to the window, which had a seat and storage area under it, and then my brother's was perpendicular to my bed but across the room against the wall. We didn't have any other furniture in the room, and the room was kept relatively clean. Now, most of these occurrences happened in the middle of the night, and they never gave me any sort of emotional response other than the initial reaction for the first one. I would wake up with the feeling of being watched. It's the second story, so there's no way anyone is looking in my window. There are no pets inside, so I can't chalk it up to that. I roll over, and there is a large figure standing over me. Now I'm a 6'4" guy, and this seemed taller than I was, so I don't know exactly who it could have been. They made no sound, no sudden movement, just stared at me for several moments before they would sit on the window ledge. This happened more times than I can count, but each time the figure seemed to change, but they always stayed a hulking frame of a man. I never saw any hair or distinctive features to apply a gender, but the shoulders and height make me think male. The figures would never interact beyond leaning in, shifting a little when I awoke, or acting as though they were straightening back up from leaning in towards me. I never asked any sort of question or physically interacted with them, they were just there. Now I've had a pretty strong sixth sense most of my life, and my mother has told me stories of when I was a kid and talking about my friends, who were usually some old person, or talking to empty spaces. So I've never been able to determine if they were some sort of spirit or not, but it wasn't until my college days that I heard about shadow men and looked into it, and that's more what I believe I encountered. My other encounter that has had a lasting impact on me was when I was staying at a friend's home after a night of playing games in college. I fell asleep in his sister's bed as she was out of town and his parents had gone to sleep hours ago. It was probably 4 a.m., the basement made it hard to tell, but his monitor was still on. I awake to the door to a room opening. It was a door with several window frames in it, and I see a large, and I mean bend at the waist large, figure enter the room. The doorway looks like the entrance to a kid's playhouse with the way this figure filled it. No one in the house is that big, mind you, and the room instantly took on a dark feeling. As mentioned, I'd had run-ins in the past with figures like this, but none of them made the hair on my body stand up like this. It is as I write this even. The figure just stood there as they have always done, didn't move, didn't make a sound, and didn't try to initiate any form of communication. Nothing. I just sat there entranced as this massive shadow engulfed the room. I don't remember falling back asleep or passing out. Nothing. I just remember staring at the figure and then waking up. Now I don't know if they were the same group of figures. I'd never felt I was going to be harmed, but the ominous pressure from the last one was definitely a different experience from all the others I had had. Anyway, thoughts and hypotheses are welcome. A little girl ghost and an evil man ghost haunt my husband's family. When I started dating my, now, husband, I noticed some weird things at his house. First of all, he lived in the garage, and I couldn't stand to go anywhere else in the house. The energy was so frightening. One time I dog sat for his family while they were out of town. Little weird things happened. For example, they had a heavy wooden potato box about 3 feet tall. I walked past it on my way to the laundry room, and not even 10 seconds later, I walked back into the kitchen, and the thing had moved about 6 feet away from the wall. I couldn't sleep in any room of the house, and this was before I knew the stories. The things I felt and saw were not the scariest things to happen at the house, not by a long shot. After I told my husband about the feelings I had, he and his parents started telling me about the encounters they have had with the ghosts who reside there. It's hard to say which encounter was the scariest, but I will start with this one. My husband's little sister, Becky, was about 3 when this happened. Shortly after they moved into the house, Mom was walking by Becky's room and heard her talking to someone. No one else was home, so she went in there to ask her what she was doing. Becky said, "I'm talking to Erica. Erica says that you are a good mommy and she likes you." Mom thought, "Oh great, an invisible friend just popped up." Later, Mom learned from neighbors that a daycare used to be at their house. The daycare shut down after 1 or 2 children, whose names I can't recall now, died there. Mom decided to do some research on the internet about it and came across a memorial page for a little girl who died at the daycare that used to be run out of their house. Her name was Erica. Becky walked by and saw the picture of the girl on the screen and said, "That's Erica, Mommy." The whole family saw the little girl Erica multiple times. Once when they played hide and seek, the oldest sister, my husband has 5 little sisters, saw feet scurrying around the corner that she knew were not any of her sisters, and when she ran around the corner to go investigate, no one was there. Mom was lying in bed one night, and she thought she heard her little dog scratching the side of the bed to get up. Mom leaned over the side of the bed to pick her up, but it wasn't the dog, it was the little girl ghost crouched down beside the bed. The girl jumped up, and Mom freaked out, then she was gone. There is also a man ghost in the house, but nobody knows if there is any history behind him or where he came from. A couple of stories about him. One day my husband was home alone with 2 of his sisters. His sisters were playing in their room with the door shut. Keep in mind, this is in the middle of the day. My husband goes to walk upstairs but freezes when he sees a man standing at the top of the stairs. The man was older and was wearing clothes that were very out of date. He just stood there, staring at my husband. Finally, my husband mustered up the courage to shout, "Get the hell out of my house." Thinking that this man was an intruder, even though he had a weird feeling about him. The man, without saying a word, turned and walked into his sister's room, where they were playing. My husband freaked out and ran upstairs as fast as he could, but when he got into their room, the man was gone, and the girls didn't see him come in. The man was not in any of the other rooms, no windows were open, and he was nowhere to be seen. My husband's stepdad had an encounter with the man too. One night when he was getting ready for bed, he heard a distinct, deep, loud voice say directly into his ear, "The girls are mine." This one was particularly frightening, considering he lived with 6 women, my husband had moved out at this time. There are a lot more stories, these are just the ones that stick out to me right now. Maybe I will post more later. I owned a tiny, 1-bedroom house about 20 years ago that had activity from the first month I moved in. It started with things disappearing and reappearing in different places or even the same place after looking everywhere. Then friends would come over, and things would move from their pockets to a table, or a purse would be moved from the chair to the doorknob. Really obvious things. After a few months I started seeing someone out of the corner of my eye or a shadow behind the shower curtain. As he became more corporeal, I became more frightened. One night, I even felt someone sit on my bed when I was home alone. That's when I got up, turned on a movie, and tried sleeping on the couch. Eventually I talked to the ghost and told him that I knew he was there, but I just didn't want to see him. That was too much for me. After that, he only played the occasional prank but was never visible. My afternoon of terror. This story takes place about 3 months ago, back in August.
I, a 13-year-old male, was just chilling with my brother. We were home alone because our mom was at work.
So, we were on the couch watching YouTube when my brother's girlfriend texted him, "Hey, wanna come over?" So of course my brother says he wants to, and he goes to grab his bike to go to her house. Right before he leaves, he tells me, "Be safe, don't break anything, and don't scream. I hate when you do that." So I agreed with his rules, and then he went out. I knew I was going to be home alone for a while because my mom didn't get back for another hour or so. I called my friend and asked him if he wanted to hop on, and then we hopped on Fortnite. But as we were playing, I took off my headset because I heard a voice, then the voice was gone again. It sounded like my sister. I went to go say hi and see how her day was, but when I opened my door, no one was there, but my dogs were looking at the spot the voice came from. So, I shrugged it off because our house is old, so I blamed it on that. Like 20 minutes go by, and then I hear it again, but this time it's my mom. I was confused because she wasn't supposed to be home for another 40 minutes. I just thought maybe she got off work early like she usually does. So, I again went out of my room to say hi and see how her day was, but again, no one was there, but the dogs were staring at the same spot, but this time they were whimpering too. I was a little weirded out, but I just shrugged it off and blamed it on the old house again. Another 30 minutes or so go by, and this time I hear my brother. I was really confused because he was supposed to be at his girlfriend's house, and he usually stays at her house for a couple of hours. But I didn't think much of it until I went to go say hi. He wasn't there. Now I was really scared because I heard all 3 of my family members' voices, but yet none of them were here. I started crying because I was scared. I called my brother to tell him what happened. While I was on the phone with him, I heard a little boy laughing and stomping his feet. I turned around and heard the noises coming from my little sister's room. I opened the door, and the noises stop, and everything goes quiet. I told my brother what had just happened, and he told me to go outside and wait for our mom. She was going to be there in like 10 minutes. I wait outside for my mom. I tell her what happened. We checked the house, and everything was the same. To this day I still don't know what those noises were, and I do still hear them from time to time, but my mom just tells me it's in my head. I know what I heard, though, and I am coming on here to try and see if anyone knows what they were. When I was a kid, I didn't really have creepy experiences outside of a fear of the dark or being scared after watching my dad play Resident Evil. However, one day, when I was perhaps 7 or 8 years old, my parents bravely decided to purchase their first house. This house was built in the 1800s, so we had some weird experiences, like hearing someone walking when no one was there, the dogs barking at nothing up the stairs, sounds of glass breaking, and hearing people whispering my name while trying to sleep. We had eerie feelings sometimes, and there's a little more, but it never was crazier than that. But for some reason, when we moved to a home that was maybe 10 years old, it was like that on steroids. So I decided to share experiences I remember in this home. When I was 13 in 2005, we moved to the new home, and I was excited for the first night. I was mainly pleased because a newer home means no creepy stuff, and it was difficult not telling people at 11 or 12 that I was spooked out at night. My first night wasn't with the family, it was a day later because my parents wanted me at a friend's house so they could set my room up. That first night, I felt the same fear I had felt in the old house, but I didn't understand why. The dark didn't scare me anymore, I just felt afraid, like something was there. As I pull my blanket over my head, I hear something dragging off my dresser and onto the floor. However, I hear it again maybe a second after the drop, over and over. It sounded like something small and with some weight on it, so there wasn't a big noise when it dropped. The thing was I could only think of one item that it could be, which was a small elephant with a crystal-like ball between its head and legs that my grandmother owned. It's confusing because if it fell, I wouldn't hear it over and over again, and it didn't sound like it was being picked up and placed on my dresser again. A few weeks later I hear stomping upstairs and assume it was my cats playing. I heard the noise move through every room and didn't think much of it. It's difficult to explain, but I just felt like I needed to keep my eyes locked on the TV in the living room, so I did. The stomping went downstairs, and then the basement door opened and slammed shut. I was freaked out when I heard it open and refused to turn my head. Once the door slammed, the stomping was done, and I was freaked out. After I realized the cats wouldn't make such loud stomping. A year later I had another experience, but it's more funny to me. My mother bought me this band Trivium's Ascendancy album, and at the time it was considered their best work. I somehow lost this CD and was not happy about it since this was their best album at the time. I typically kept it on my nightstand, and when I couldn't find it, I actually moved the stand to see if maybe it fell behind it, but I couldn't find it, not even under it. Back in this time the high school was overcrowded, so freshmen and sophomores started school around 10, which meant I would stay up late. One night I did that and decided to put on my headphones and listen to music, but as I was lying down and enjoying my music, I heard a thud by the nightstand. I looked, and nothing was there, but I felt like I should move the nightstand, so when I did, boom, my CD was behind it, and I was confused. After freshman year ended and going into summer break, I had made some more friends who would sometimes stay the night. Two of my friends, Aaron and Alan, were constantly over, and we would just stay up late and play games at my house. One night around 3 or 4, I was getting tired, so we all decided to head downstairs to the basement and pass out. I picked the love seat to pass out on, while Aaron and Alan picked the reclining couch. I remember they wouldn't stop talking, and I was close to telling them to be quiet, but we heard someone run down the stairs, a loud bang, and then a scream. We all shot up, looked at each other, and said, "Did you hear that?" Of course, we all ran by what we heard to each other, and it was all the same for us, so we ran upstairs. The creepy part was the scream didn't sound like anyone we knew, so while running upstairs, we didn't know who it would be, but as we opened the door, there was nothing there. We decided to run up to my room and pass out there instead. I brought it up to my mom the next day, and she had an excuse for it, but that part gets fun later. My sophomore year gets a bit more creepy, though. By this time a new school was built, so passing out at 1 or 2 was off the table, so this time I had to be in bed early. I was the last to go to sleep, which was normal at the time, so as I get ready and climb into bed, I hear decently paced and hard stomping. It started upstairs, then went downstairs and back up again. Each time the stomping stopped at what sounded like the bathroom, which was the first room you would come to when getting upstairs. I thought it was one of our cats, but my parents' door was closed, so the cats were with them, and they wouldn't stomp like that. At most, the cats would make very fast running sounds and light steps. As I wait for the stomping to cease downstairs, I exit my room, turn on the light, and glance down the railing, only to find it empty. So I shut the light off and lay down, but now the stomping goes up the stairs, back down, and then back up but further in the hallway. Every time it goes back upstairs, it gets further in the hallway, so I freak out, slam my door, turn on the light, and turn on my TV for noise. The stomping makes it close to my room, but that's as far as it goes for a bit before it stops. I got goosebumps typing this, and this happened one other time a few years later. The disembodied growling phenomenon. Back then I lived in my old family home, an old brick building built somewhere between the late 1800s and early 1900s as worker accommodation during industrialization. Although it was built in the late 1800s, it wasn't particularly old for a house in Central Europe. I always suspected that there was something wrong with the house. During the 22 years I lived there, I accumulated quite a number of crazy incidents, which I'd also love to share here sometime. It was the summer of 2008. I, 15 at the time, was lazing around in the living room, watching cartoons in the middle of the day until I got bored. It was one of those sunny, cozy Saturday afternoons where no one would suspect anything bad or supernatural to happen. I turned off the TV, got off the couch, and was about to leave the room when, in the middle of the doorframe, I got the sudden sensation that I should stop. That something was blocking my path. At the same time, I heard it. There was a loud and deep growling noise, like from a large and very angry dog. The sound grew even louder and deeper. I could feel it vibrating in my whole body, like the bass during a concert. And it felt like the sound was coming from directly in front of me. Never before in my life had I felt like my life was in danger. In that moment, I did. Only my reptile brain activated, selecting freeze from the fight, flight, or freeze response options. My entire body tensed, causing every hair to stand up. As if some primal instinct made my body react like prey in front of a predator. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The noise vanished, along with the sense of presence, and I found myself staring into an empty, bright dining room. My knees gave out from under me, and I let myself slide onto the floor, gasping for air. In all those years I tried to find an explanation for what happened. It couldn't have been a dream, as I was wide awake and it was the middle of the day. It couldn't have been a loud noise from a truck or other heavy vehicle outside, as it came from the wrong direction and no one else heard it. It couldn't have been the neighbor's dog, as I had heard him bark, growl, howl, and jump around many times, and all the noises he made were way more muffled and a lot quieter through the walls. While a bunch of other things happen in this house, often repeatedly, This growl only happens once and never again. I still think about it occasionally, and it still gives me a weird gut feeling. And I have noticed that I'm not the only one who has experienced this phenomenon. So if anyone wants to share their story or has any idea what this could have been or any rational explanation, please comment. I'm curious about your stories and theories. I believe some sort of evil entity is attached to me and my friends. I'm 18 from Pennsylvania, and I am also quite spiritually enlightened, for lack of a better term. Today, my friends and I decided to DoorDash for some quick money and smoke because everyone's weekend was conveniently stressful. We're just potheads. After we finished DoorDashing, we made the decision to smoke at a nearby school. It sounds dumb, but it's a secluded location, and it was convenient in reference to everyone's drop-off location. Plus it was about 9 o'clock by the time we got there, so it was also dark. As we waited for the weed man and a little before that as well, we got to talking about conspiracy theories for a good 2 hours. This conversation took a significant turn when we began discussing and reminiscing about SCP/creepypastas from our childhood. The topic, location, substance being consumed, and vibe in the car all combined to create a memorable and surreal experience. That's what I believe, at least, because it still doesn't logically make sense to me right now. Once we finished smoking, and I mean, right as we finished smoking, I decided to start getting deep into thought. Someone with ADHD shouldn't have a problem doing this, and I never have. But today I did. Now, a little bit about me. Since I was little, I've always had good intuition, and I could just tell who were good or struggling people. I don't believe in calling them bad. That's important because once I started dabbling in psychedelics, those abilities evolved into me seeing auras and being able to tell you who you are just by looking at you and being in your presence. Along with that, I've been hearing spirits talk to me and seeing them as well. And I promise it's not the psychedelics because this was also something that happened to me when I was younger, just not as frequently as now. So back to being deep in thought, I couldn't quite get anything going. And I start hearing whispers. My friend had heard whispers about 10 minutes before I did, but they were coming from the opposite side of the car. Now when I hear this, I assume it's a spirit struggling to speak up, so I let it be known that I'm allowing its words to be heard. When I did that, the whispering turned into growling. The growling was not the sound of an animal, nor was it the sound of a human. When I heard it, my stomach sank, and I couldn't breathe because thereafter terror, I believe, for the first time in my life. After that, on the way to get some sage. While I was driving everyone home, I noticed a car down the street about 2 blocks away. Now, the whole ride there I was focusing on people because I honestly believed I was going to see a person disappear as, like, a cherry on top of this paranormal fiasco. But as the 2 people I saw continue to walk, once they passed the car's headlights, they disappeared, and I couldn't process it until I parked on the side of the road. Coincidentally, that happened at 11:11. And thereafter, I just haven't felt right, even after sagging. If anyone has any information on what might have happened, please let me know what's going on. Entity lurking in the neighborhood I grew up in. It randomly appears after years and in different houses. I have no idea what it is, and I wonder if anyone has an explanation. There's some kind of entity that lurks around my childhood neighborhood. I hadn't thought about it in years, until something recently happened to the neighbors. I have no idea what it is, and I'd be grateful if anyone else had an idea of what it could be. The first time I can remember it, I was a kid on Christmas Eve. The rest of my family had gone to midnight mass, except for my mom's cousin and me. He just didn't feel like going, and my mom wanted me to go to bed, so he stayed home with me. At some point after they left, I woke, and I couldn't get back to sleep because I was so excited for Santa to come. I got up to look for my cousin. I checked the house but couldn't find him. I looked out the window and saw him outside, shoveling snow and salting the walkway. I put on my boots and went outside, telling him I would rather not sleep. He laughed and told me to give him a second. He was trying to make sure my grandma wouldn't slip when she got home. So, while he worked, I stood outside with him, and he told me stories about Christmases from before I was born. Including one where he told me about one where my uncle was trying to straighten up a star on the Christmas tree during the Christmas party, and he fell and took the whole tree down. We were laughing and having a good time until something strange happened. We saw her. The woman was dressed in a very eccentric outfit. A long black veil that almost looked like a round tablecloth and a long black dress. She didn't have a coat on either, which I found odd. I assumed she was dressed up for mass. My cousin said Merry Christmas to her as she walked by us. She nodded but didn't say anything back. I watched her walk straight up the sidewalk and disappear into the night. Other than her strange outfit and the eerie feeling we got from her, nothing too strange, right? However, When my cousin attempted to sweep the area where she had just walked, he suddenly froze. There were no footprints. At first, he just stared. Then he turned to me and asked, "She walked through here, right?" I nodded. He kept staring at the untouched snow, trying to make sense of it. Saying, "Maybe she walked in the street?" But there was snow there too, no footprints. He sent me inside while he walked up the road to see where she went. However, he found no evidence of her presence. No footprints anywhere, no marks from her, no sign of her, nothing to indicate anyone was there. When my family got back from Mass, my cousin told them about what we saw. He was clearly shaken, but no one had an explanation. My grandma insisted that we were mistaken about where she had walked, but we couldn't have been because she walked right past us, and we saw her go up the street a little bit. Additionally, by the time my family had gotten home, other people had come back from midnight Mass and left footprints and tire prints, so we couldn't emphasize enough to them how strange it was. Eventually, it was just one of those weird things that happened. A few years later, my older sister was in college and home for Thanksgiving. She was staying up late, working on a paper in the computer room. My mom and dad were in the kitchen still prepping things for Thanksgiving, and I was asleep. Suddenly, I woke up to the sound of my sister running from the back room to the kitchen, completely panicked. She told us she had been working when she suddenly felt like someone was sitting next to her, watching her. When she turned to look, she saw an older woman, plain as day, sitting right beside her. There was no chair there or no place to sit, so she was really weirded out by the fact she was eye level with this person. The woman smiled at her, and then she turned to look at the computer screen. I looked back at my sister, and then my sister got up to leave but started running when she turned around and saw the woman was in the middle of the room. My dad checked the whole house. He made sure all the doors and windows were locked. When he went to the front window to check if they were locked, he called for my mom. My nosy ass came running too. He pointed outside and said, "Do you see that?" A human-like shadow was floating, not walking, up the same stretch of road where my cousin and I had seen the woman years before. I got a horrible sense of dread and terror, but my family tried to explain it away. My dad said that my sister had been staring at the computer screen for hours and her eyes were probably tired and not focusing properly on things, or that maybe she had fallen asleep at the desk, and it was a bad dream. My grandma said the shadow was just a shadow, and they went on to finish prepping for Thanksgiving and wouldn't talk about it anymore. Years passed, and I never thought much about it again. This was the case until a few months ago. My dad called me and said his roof was leaking. He needed help patching it up, so my husband went over to lend a hand. They had to run to Home Depot for supplies, and when they got back, they saw the short-term renters from the house across the street standing outside. The renters asked if my parents had security cameras. Something had happened the night before, and they were terrified. The husband had gone to bed, but the wife had stayed up watching TV. She suddenly got the feeling that someone was sitting next to her. When she turned, there was an old woman sitting on the couch, staring at her. The wife screamed and ran from the room, waking up her husband. He searched the house but found nothing, except for a few unlocked windows that were way too high for someone to climb in through, and he also thought that there might be impressions in the mud if someone had jumped out of the window to get out. My dad was shaken, but he didn't tell them why. He checked the footage from his Ring cameras. The only thing they captured around that time was a single car passing by. Nothing else. The renters asked their Airbnb hosts about the cameras, which only pointed at the key box and carport. They hadn't seen anything unusual. My dad explained the whole history of seeing this entity to my husband, who suggested we ask other neighbors about it, but my parents don't want anyone thinking they are crazy, lol. I don't have an explanation. If anyone has theories, I'd love to hear them. I wonder. What is she? And why does she keep appearing? We had always thought she was attached to us or the house in some way because of a family tragedy that happened in the house, but apparently not if she's appearing in other homes in the area. Are the old lady and the shadow lady we see outside the same entity? I also think it's intriguing that she appears around the same time of year. The last time she was spotted happened around early to mid-November. My sister saw her in late November, and we saw her Christmas Eve. She also tends to appear at celebratory occasions or happy events. We've seen her during holidays, and I think the renters across the street were on a trip having a delayed honeymoon or something similar. Other info, she doesn't really feel threatening or evil, it's just really unsettling. A collection of strange true stories. I wanted to share a few unusual stories I've heard over the years. I've been a nurse for a long time on various wards, but for extra shifts, I worked on a ward for the elderly. Those were the shifts I enjoyed the most because of how wonderful and special the patients were. I always liked to get to know them and make them feel important, so, Essentially, asking for a true story ended up being a bonding experience. Inevitably, I would ask for a weird or supernatural tale. Almost everyone had something. I would hate for these odd stories to disappear or just remain in my head. They may not be much, but it's nice for me to have a place to write them, and someone might like these and remember them too. Obviously, I can't 100% say these are true. But I believe them completely now and then. They were told to me as real events. First, a gentleman called Bill. During World War II, Bill, along with his unit, served as a soldier in a rural area of France. They ordered him and 5 others to clear out a village where they suspected German soldiers were hiding. They did this by throwing a grenade down into cellars. They found no one, but in the 6th house, Bill chucked the grenade, and it didn't go off. The grenades they had used so far had been faultless and effective. When this grenade failed, they received an order to descend into the cellar for visual inspection. Bill feared he was about to collide with a group of enemy soldiers. Instead, he discovered a few women and children hiding. The grenade would have killed or injured them all. He swore it was divine intervention and not luck. No other grenade failed for him ever again, and later, one of the women even taught the group how to darn their socks. William, another gentleman, served as a fighter plane mechanic at a UK airbase. It was a tough job, as parts were in short supply and aircraft usually came back severely damaged, if they came back at all. He was friendly with a few pilots, but unfortunately, none of them survived, and he said they often discussed bright, pulsing lights in the sky. They didn't use the term Foo Fighters, as we do. Contrary to popular belief, none of them at the time believed they were enemy aircraft or enemy technology. Most believed the lights were supernatural in origin, and they reported how fast they were. It was considered lucky to catch a glimpse of one. The lights also traveled in groups or clusters. 3. A lady called Nina, who was almost 100 years old at the time, used to see dancing lights in the woodland near her home in Buxton, UK, when she was small and hear a woman laughing. They would find scorched ground in the fields at least once a month. It was such a regular occurrence for her family that they told the local vicar what was going on. He was wary and warned the family to ignore it. She recalled that the sheep had gone missing twice. They seemed to have vanished from a fenced-in area overnight. Her father insisted that they keep their sheep in a barn after the second incident. They called them the fright lights. Sometimes, objects would move by themselves in the house, and once, a plate hit her distraught mother and scared her terribly. This would have been around 1920 to 1930. I met Nina in 2008, roughly. She had always wondered about it but had no idea what was happening back then. 4. A woman called Queenie was on a ward. This would have been around 2008. She was a sweet old lady who hadn't seen her sister for decades. They'd argued and lost touch, and it was her greatest wish to see her once more. She knew her married name but not her address. Queenie was in palliative care and was only waiting for a bed on a terminal ward. We all wondered how to find her sister. We couldn't talk long because we had 2 more admissions. To everyone's shock, one of the new admissions was Queenie's sister. Personally, I'll never forget this. We all experienced a profound shock. The surprise was immense. The story of them reuniting by complete chance or fate even made the local paper. Queenie was shocked and obviously overjoyed. There were many happy tears that day. One last story for now. Another British soldier named Stan was stationed in Germany in 1944. His group dug in, evading enemy soldiers near a town they were attempting to capture. The British group had made good ground, and there were only a few enemy men left in the town. The British group split into 2. Stan took shelter behind a brick wall and some old machinery. He was going to attempt to run to get behind the wall of a house. Just as he was about to move, he saw one of his unit members, a man named George, standing in front of him. George said, "Go back, you'll be shot." Stan tried to reach for George to pull him down. He couldn't fathom why George was just standing there. Gunshots rang out, and Stan ducked. George had vanished. Stan did not flee. He was shaken and confused, wondering where his friend was. Later, after the town was cleared, Stan found out that George had been killed minutes before he'd seen him. I hope these have been enjoyed. I have so many true tales like this tucked away in my mind. It's nice that someone else's memories can live on. To begin with, northern British Columbia is an intimidating location. It's quiet, there's lots of forestry, and a crap load of weird shit happens here. One of my best friends is native and grew up on a reserve in northern BC before moving to Vancouver for school. I've lived in Vancouver most of my life, and we met through a class we shared. Anyway, so he has a lot of scary-ass stories from his time at the reserve, but I'm a true skeptic. I don't believe anything someone tells me until I've seen proof. But they're intriguing and fun to listen to/imagine, so they always captivated me. Naturally, this kind of thing annoys him, because by the way he talks about these experiences, he must really feel like they happened. He talks about ghosts, aliens, and similar experiences. So last summer, 2015, he basically tells me to man up or shut up. By that, he meant accompany him to his reserve and see for myself. However, it wasn't limited to just the reserve. Nope. My friend is ducking evil. He wanted to stay in a cabin, just for one night, in the middle of the woods adjacent to the reserve. Me being a dumb, proud asshole thought, duck yeah, time to prove my manhood. So I'm all for it. So we drive up on a Friday night right after school. Didn't bring anything because the cabin is full of supplies, and it's only for one night, so whatever. Now's the fun part. We stop at the reserve so he can show me around because I've never been to one. It's pretty. Obviously nothing to do, but still. He tells his family of our plan, and they lose their ducking minds. Not on me, because duck me, apparently. But on him. Telling him all about how the spirits are going to take him away and stuff. They try to scare both of us with a story of a man who stayed in the cabin, went missing for several weeks, then walked out of the woods and into the reserve with no clothes and half his weight. Couldn't speak a damn word. He still doesn't speak, apparently. To me, it was just more spooky stories, but to him, it was terrifying. But I think he's more of a proud ducker than I am, so he really wanted to make his point that this isn't all a joke like I seem to think it is. We decided to head to the cabin anyway. Leave the car at the reserve and just walk. It was only maybe half an hour of walking, but it was fairly thick. We arrive, sit down, and just talk for a while. We share more spooky stories and other related topics. A couple of hours later, at about 7 p.m., which is just a couple of hours before it gets dark, we decide to go out for a walk and explore the area. There's beer in the fridge because some poor duck actually lives here or something and pays for electricity, apparently. It's unfortunate that Kokani doesn't have access to clean water, but we still have it. So we're drinking and laughing while walking, and he's telling me all about the skinwalkers. He describes them as evil doers who turn to cannibalism and transform into shape-shifting deer freaks. It doesn't really faze me, but it's clear that it's bothering him just talking about it. I try to forget about it, but he starts retelling the story of the naked guy walking out of the woods. He concludes that the man was probably abducted by a skinwalker. Not to eat, as I thought, but just to keep around and use as bait? Maybe to get people in there searching for him and then eat those people? I wasn't really paying attention. I know this just sounds too goddamn convenient, but we're at a big open space between trees now, and there's a ducking deer looking at us. The deer's eyes are huge and black. I wouldn't say this was a field or anything. It's merely a clearing of dirt. And it's just, ducking, staring. Not moving. I've been close to deer before, so this isn't new to me. Deer are stupid. Like a ducking retard, I start taunting the deer. I'm shouting things like Wendy, go home. Go get him, Wendy. Shoo. And my friend isn't moving an inch. He's just silent and wide-eyed. I stepped forward, the deer still staring like a statue, and my friend, without warning, slapped my arm. He's gripping my arm so tight that it's cutting off blood circulation. Only then do I look at him, notice how serious he is, and see that he is standing completely still. I glance back at the deer, still grinning foolishly, and ask myself, what? It's just a deer. My friend, still staring at the deer, just quietly says, a deer would have heard us coming and left. Now, that gives me a ducking shiver, because he's dead right. He begins to step back, indicating with a pull on my arm that I should follow suit, which I do. After a couple of steps, the deer stands up. Completely stands. I know, I've seen in videos that deer will stand like this sometimes. But this is unnatural as ducking looking. It doesn't look like it's trying to keep its balance or anything. It just stands there, still ducking staring. My friend yells, run. And we both take off in a full force sprint back the direction we came from. My heart is ducking exploding. I'm extremely anxious while writing this. I can't even begin to describe the silence and tranquility that pervaded the entire situation, all the while harboring the unimaginably terrifying thought that I was about to die. That I'll be eaten alive, will never be found, and all my family and friends will be crushed. It's likely that both of us will become mere components of legends, relegated to the status of a silly tale meant to frighten children. Duck. Sorry. So we're running like ducking hell. I made a horrific mistake that is etched into my mind, giving me nightmares at least once a week since last year. I look back, and the deer looks thinner. The deer appears to be as thin as a boneless skeleton. Way taller than us or the deer we saw earlier. And the head isn't at all like a deer. It looks exactly like a cliché bison skull right out of some stupid old Western movie. There are no ducking big black eyes, just big black holes. No mouth. Just another big black hole. And it's sprinting just as fast as we are. I mean an all-out sprint, arms swinging and all, like a marathon runner. I look back to my friend, and he's just running a couple of feet ahead of me, just about to step over a fallen tree. That's all I remember before everything went black. You would think now that I would be dead, but surprise. I'm here. I'm in the cabin. I wake up in the cabin on the floor. My friend is on the couch. I'm still in the exact state of mind I was in when we were running, so I'm just ducking, screaming my head off, and I get up and run into the fridge headfirst. That hurt. But I snapped out of it, and my friend is now awake on the couch. His mouth is gaping, and he's lying on his belly but with his arms fully extended and propping him up. I stare at him, and he stares at me. The place is ducking wrecked. There's food, furniture, and general stuff thrown out all over the ducking place. My friend gets up, and I walk up to him, and we just hug because holy duck, we needed that. We ask each other if we're okay, blah blah blah, that kind of stuff. Totally fine. The sun is shining, neither of us has sustained any injuries, yet our fear surpasses anything I've ever experienced. My friend, the ducking genius crap that he is, says, what if it's coming back? I ducking hate him for that. God ducking damn it. We went right back to running like we were doing before, but even harder. I don't think we even bothered to close the door to the cabin. We just hauled ass to the reserve, which took us maybe 10 minutes tops. I kept looking back because I'm a ducking chump. I'm pretty sure I saw a deer at one point in the distance between trees, but we'll just pretend that didn't happen because that's exactly what you would expect, so duck it. We're at the reserve now, and we both agree not to say a ducking word. We get to his family's house, and they lose their minds. Again. Wanna know why? Because it's ducking Sunday. Yup. It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon, and his father and two uncles went with some hunting rifles and flashlights in the woods to come get us but couldn't find the cabin. My friend starts crying because he genuinely thinks they're dead while telling his mother the whole story. He says it was a trap and that we were bait, and now that the Wendigo let them leave, his father and uncles will be taken instead. This is really hard to write about because I'm tearing up like I did back then again, and everything has just been rushing back. His father and uncles are fine, though. I'm not going to build up to that or anything because I think we both need relief right now. They're fine and walk out of the woods an hour later, confused about how we got there without them seeing us, which was such a massive ducking relief for my friend and myself because the guilt and uncertainty of whether they would actually return or not was brutal and made my chest hurt. So we decide to tell them everything anyway. They're doing the whole "we're so glad you're okay, we were worried sick, but we warned you, you ducking idiots" thing. They totally deserved it. We calmed down a bit, hopped in his car, and then drove back to the city. I'm going to go have a cozy warm cup of tea and make sure everything is locked now. Creepy housing development. It was suggested to me that this story might be appreciated here. I'm not a cop, but my story is somewhat relevant. I recently started working as a security guard, and one of my first assignments was the graveyard shift at a new housing development outside of town. Over the course of the 3 nights I worked there, I had some pretty bizarre things happen. While doing my patrols through the neighborhood, I would often see people watching me from the upper windows of the vacant houses, but when I would enter the house to investigate, they would be empty. One of the first things on my to-do list when I arrived on site was to go through the 8 model homes next to the real estate office and turn off all the lights and TVs. The first night, this part went smoothly, but the next night, as I was making my way through the kitchen of the 4th house, I heard the light switch click and all the lights in the kitchen went out. It wasn't a power surge or a blown breaker, as all the appliances were still on and all the little green lights underneath the light switches were still lit. A few minutes later, I heard another click, and the lights came back on, followed by the lights in the next house going out, but the TV remaining on. By the time I made my way to the next house, the lights were back on, but the TV was in standby, only possible by hitting the button on the front. As I was finishing up in the last house, I looked out the window and saw that the 2nd and 3rd houses were lit up again. The 3rd night, the light situation got weirder. The lights would either turn off or on in a room as I entered, and in one house, as I entered the kitchen, the hood light over the stove turned on. As I turned to look at it, I heard a series of clicks coming from the 2nd floor, as if someone were running through the house turning on the lights. When I went up there, sure enough, many of the lights I had turned off were back on. In another house, a desk lamp turned itself back on 3 times. Another lamp in the same house that had a dimmer slowly started lighting up right in front of me. Now, for the worst events. As I was walking past one of the construction sites, I saw what appeared to be a skunk walk behind the porta potty. When it walked back out, however, it looked more like a black Shih Tzu. It proceeded to change size, shape, and color several more times right in front of me: Doberman, Bloodhound, Tan Mastiff, then finally a yellow lab, before running off into the dark. I'm willing to concede all of these can either be chalked up to my mind/eyes playing tricks or a timer gone haywire. I was assured there wasn't one, but this last one defies logical explanation. As I was walking back to the office around 2:30, I glanced up at one of the houses. As I did, something hit me in between my left pec and shoulder. Hard. Hard enough to stagger me. I weigh 250 pounds, so I'm not exactly little. It felt as if someone were walking the opposite direction on the sidewalk and shoved their way past me. I have since asked my supervisors not to assign me to that site again. I would be completely dismissive of the paranormal as explainable things if it weren't for one experience. I've had a handful of paranormal experiences in my life that can all be chalked up to anxiety, an overactive imagination, or being high, except for one. It was pretty minor, but I still haven't been able to explain it no matter how I rack my brain. Back when I was a child and still a Christian, specifically of the evangelical flavor, I'd often theorize about things I read in the Bible as if it were any of the other stories I like to do that with. My churchmates and pastor were not fans of my hot Christian lore takes. If you were wondering, one notion that I'd taken to was the idea that demons scare people because that's what gives them power to escalate and do everything else. So the few times I found myself in a situation that I decided might be paranormal, my approach was to firmly and pointedly ignore it. My childhood best friend lived in a house that she had strange experiences in, as did her dad. She frequently heard footsteps and experienced a sense of being under observation. Things went missing and showed up in odd places. Random chills in the air. That sort of thing, pretty stereotypical ghost tropes. I heard the footsteps once, but that could have been house sounds. I definitely experienced the random chills and sudden distinct feeling of being watched and loomed over, but that could have been anxiety, and you know how fear can be contagious around other people, especially if you're already predisposed to believe in ghosts and demons. I definitely had nightmares more often in that house, but that could have been subconscious fears. I heard children laughing once, but I do have an overactive imagination and have had auditory hallucinations more than a handful of times. The one thing I could never explain was this. I'd been coming to this house since age 8, and I was now 18. I was staying with my friend and her dad for a few months. I wanted to try living somewhere that wasn't with my parents for a while, and I was alone in the house at the time. I was on my computer and heard some sort of odd banging. Immediately after, I got that being loomed over feeling, that being stared at feeling, and oddly enough, I got the distinct notion that something was very angry. I responded by cranking my computer volume all the way up, on headphones, of course, and putting on an Astif movie compilation. As someone who did a lot of maladaptive daydreaming and had already gotten used to ignoring scary things I didn't like, I was able to pretty quickly remove my mind from the situation. Except, that angry feeling never went away. I didn't dwell on it, but it was still present. Even though I refused to acknowledge it, I distinctly remember feeling that anger swell. And then, completely alone in the house, a penny was pitched at the back of my head hard enough that it left a tiny goose egg afterwards. You'd think that would freak me out, and I did startle, of course, but immediately after I actually burst out laughing. I think I said something along the lines of paranormal activity really hyped you duckers up, didn't it? And then promptly returned to watching stick men vomit rainbows. The feeling dissipated. I remember noticing, some time later, that I never got any weird feelings in the house anymore unless I was around my friend. I'm still dubious about the paranormal. I'd be outright dismissive if it weren't for that goddamn penny. To this day it still bothers me deeply, and I have no way to explain it. My great-grandmother's last story before her death. My great-grandmother, from my mother's side, passed away 2 years ago. She was about 95 to 100 years old. I do not know the exact age because I never asked. 2 months before her death, she told us about an incident many years ago when she was a preteen. She had a maternal aunt who was well known for her beauty. They came from a family of zamindars, aka nobles. Ever since she turned 12, her grandfather started having nightmares of a man who told him to never let his granddaughter get married, as she will be his wife. The grandfather sought the help of an elder to know what that dream actually meant. The elder said that the man he saw in his dream was a jinn who had fallen for his granddaughter. Though he didn't really believe in jinns, he was scared for his granddaughter. And thus rejected most people who proposed to marry her. But there was one person he couldn't refuse. That was his best friend's grandson. That boy had been her childhood friend and frequently visited their home. So when he proposed to her in front of the whole family, the grandpa had no choice but to accept it. She, the aunt, was 15 at the time. Everything proceeded without any problem until the night before the marriage. The bride sat in a room with her bridesmaids, including my great-grandmother, when the incident occurred. Suddenly the bride's hair, which was tied in a traditional way, we call it kapoa, but I don't know the exact English, became extremely hard. And her head started hurting. No one knew what was going on except the grandfather. His worst nightmare came to reality. The air stayed like that the whole night. And some other paranormal incidents also occurred at night. That night the grandfather saw the same man in his dream. This time he was furious and warned him to never make that mistake again. Or the consequences would be bad. Well, the next day her hair became normal again, but the marriage was cancelled. The boy was no longer allowed in their house. This situation persisted until the grandfather's death 3 years later. After that, the boy started visiting them again, and slowly everyone forgot the grandfather's warning. Well, 5 years after the incident, the marriage happened again. This time nothing paranormal happened. The groom was dressed in a traditional white sherwani. His face was glowing with happiness. Unfortunately that happiness was not for long. That night the bride was in her room talking with her friends and sisters. Suddenly the windows and the gates of the house started shaking violently. Loud screams could be heard from outside. A terrible stench started coming from the bride's room. Everyone came out except the bride, who was crying in there. The groom realized his mistake and took permission from the father before entering the room. Suddenly the door closed behind him, and both of them got locked inside. It took 3 to 4 hours to break the gate from outside. What they saw shook them to their core. The room was stained with blood. The bride was missing, and the groom was lying on the floor. His head was twisted to the opposite side. His eyes were popped out, and his skin was pale. The beautiful white sherwani became stained with blood. On the chair there was a small bag. Inside, there was 1 gold coin. It was the price for the bride. The father spent day and night trying to find the girl, but they couldn't find her. Ultimately, their only option was to acknowledge her absence. They placed the bag in an iron chest, locked it, and buried it underground. They considered it as their daughter's grave. Well, 3 years later, the father saw a dream where that man told him that his daughter was alive and happy. They also had 2 children together. The bag held a treasure that would reward you with 1 gold coin each time you placed your hand inside. Well, the father never checked if what he said was true or not. As nothing can make up for the loss of his daughter. Well, today that house is nothing but an abandoned haunted house filled with ghost stories. We call it Babudarbari, meaning master's house. Well, it seems that was the first haunted incident in that house. It's actually pretty close to my cousin's house, where we go during vacations. Maybe that chest is still in there somewhere. But we'll never know. Odd things have been happening at my new home as of late. So we got to this new place several months ago. The family lived here before us, so we constantly were here visiting before taking it over when they moved out. Over the past 2 years of visiting, my brother and I have seen 2 odd things. 1. There was a large, egg-shaped object in the clouds, which were several miles away according to weather apps. And second, for months there was this super bright star, above the house, and every time I visited, we would see it above. We would sit and look at the sky and chat about our project we are working on together. One night while looking up at the sky, this large, bright star just turned off. He hasn't been seen there since. For months we've seen it. Never bothering to check which planet or star it was. Then as we look, blip. Turned off. It was above us, so it was not a satellite rounding the Earth and out of view. Never moved. Some told me I might get lucky and watched as the final bit of light from a star hit Earth. Anyways, we finally take over the house. We are far from anyone else except our neighbor. No traffic out here. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, my wife and I were sitting outside on the front porch as a storm approached. To our left is blue sky, but it's getting darker as the evening settles in. To the right and above us are dark thunderclouds. The streetlights just turned on. As we sit and are enjoying this cool evening, there's a tree about 20 feet in front of us. Suddenly out of the branches this inch or so long jet black ball comes floating out. It's moving to your left towards the neighbor's backyard. I follow it. Wife sees it as well but stays seated on the porch. I'm literally 10 or so feet under this thing. It's wobbling back and forth on its axis. But moving in a straight line. Take a bowl in your hands and walk with it, holding it in front of you. Then wobble it left and right. That's how this moved. But it started moving upward over the power line. I follow. It gets over the power line and about 15 or so feet away from it, hovering over the neighbor's backyard. Then, Just as it lowers behind the power line from my perspective, it vanishes. Turns off. Etc. My wife witnessed it as well. There is nothing in the neighbor's yard for it to get behind. I'm standing there, the power line is about 15 feet away, then it's about 25 feet into the neighbor's yard, and poof. Well, that was odd for sure. Some days later I'm back out on the porch watching YouTube when I hear a thud above the porch roof. I look up from my phone and instantly see in my van's reflection in the side windows a large, dark figure on the roof holding a powerful, semi-dark blue light. The point of light is bright, and I can see some of it hitting my van. Continue to hear it stepping on the roof. I jump up and run towards the van and turn around, and nothing's there. I figured some dude was trying to break in. After seeing nothing, logic enters my mind, and I tell myself it had to be a distant car's lights. But that doesn't explain why I see blue light hitting this side of my vehicle nor why there were thuds above me. Oh, and I forgot to mention just 20 or so minutes before this, a very loud but distant boom echoed across the sky. Side note, a few thunderstorms before, then lightning flew across the clouds. It didn't sound normal. Not crackly like electricity but like a motor. Like a Harley-Davidson motorcycle. Deep pop but far apart. Fwhip, fwhip, fwhip. Fast forward to last night, I'm on the back porch. There are woods behind us. Very little light. I'm standing there looking at my phone, and I hear a noise in the woods. We have armadillos and raccoons, so it doesn't strike me as odd. Suddenly a loud break of a branch and something about 2 feet tall is running in my direction. All the while the sound it makes is like the fast flapping of wings. But it's got legs and is on the ground. I freeze, and it cuts left as it gets close to me and out of sight. Now, besides the flapping of wings, size, and it running on legs at me, the oddest thing is how fast it moved. It's a good 80 feet to the woods. This thing went from the woods, busting branches, to me and to my left, out of sight, all within 3 seconds. I don't know of any animal around here that fits all this description. It was jet black. Several feet long and about to my knees. So 2 feet tall. I can hear its footsteps as it ran on top of this rapid flapping of wings. We've constantly heard things in our house. So much so that my kids refuse to sleep upstairs. So we all have been piled in the living room. Oddly, every night the very second we shut the lights off, something starts moving about in our kitchen and upstairs. I'm planning to start recording it. We also got a cat recently, and this cat does that weird meow they do when they are in heat, but as it stands up on 2 legs, it looks upstairs or up a wall. The cat has been fixed. This cat is vicious. You can't pet her without her attacking you. She won't get near you and hides all the time. But when the noise starts in the kitchen, she climbs up onto my lap or piles in with the kids and becomes a sweetheart and just stares at the kitchen. I don't know if I buy into it all, but the kids are flipping out. My oldest son, 14, tells me he saw a woman upstairs he thought was mom. He refuses to go up there now. He's one of those teens addicted to gaming on his computer 24/7. It's up there, and he won't go get it and bring it all down. I can tell he so badly wants to but won't. So I'll end up doing it for him. Last night, instead of the usual rummaging sound in the kitchen, we started hearing taps. 3 times stop. 3 times stop. Then I heard 3 taps above us in the living room, which goes into my girl's room. 3 taps stop. 3 taps stop. Strange objects. A dark figure on my roof with a blue light, a weird animal with wings yet the size of a dog is running at me. Now tapping and sounds upstairs and in the kitchen. So far nothing extreme past all that. I don't know if this means anything, but all of my kids have lost 2 to 3 teeth each since we got here. Found that to be odd. Every week or so one of the 5 out of 6 kids loses another tooth. We've put them in bags and keep them on top of the fridge, hiding them from the kids as we do the whole $1 from the tooth fairy thing. But all the teeth are gone. I say my wife misplaced them, but she swears she put them up there. Whether that means anything to anyone, I don't know. Trying to think of all the odd things to mention. Oh, one last thing. One of the youngest boys, 7, started having night terrors. Like fearful. He wakes up, sits up, looks around, and just cries with that vibrating sound in his voice. We've asked if he had a bad dream, and he said no. I said, "What are you scared of, then?" And he just doesn't answer. I've tried enticing him with things I know he wants. Tell me, and I'll buy you X. Nothing. No answer. We notice that he shakes. He grabs towards his legs as if he's in pain. So I figured growing pains. Which makes your hips or legs hurt. I asked if he wanted me to rub them. He says no, they don't hurt. It's only before he fully wakes up. His legs cripple a bit, and he bends his back forward while lying down as if reaching towards his legs. Then he cries with that shaky sound in his voice. He's a kid we are caregivers for. So not his parents. Could be nothing. Anyways, I would love to hear your ideas and thoughts. Thanks. I'm in Florida, BTW. If that matters. All of this only happened after I started getting interested in weird stuff here. It also only happened when I started helping a supposed time traveler with some artwork to explain his story. I liked it and offered to help. Now this odd stuff happens. Looking for an answer, pale creature. Last year in the early fall, on one late night, I, my brother, and his girlfriend were hanging out in a camper on my grandmother's abandoned property, may she rest in peace, when my brother's girlfriend said she had to go to the bathroom. There weren't any working facilities on site at the time, so she had to use the yard. The spot she chose was facing a corner where two exterior walls intersected, which is occupied by a large, dark green shrub. Both she and my brother went because we follow the buddy system, thank the Lord we do, and they came back inside very soon after leaving, clearly in a hurry. The explanation they provided still haunts me, causing me to become increasingly paranoid about various situations. As their story goes, she had gone a few feet away from him for some relative privacy when she looked into the corner I described. Instead of seeing the dark green shrub, she saw something extremely pale, which was the first major warning sign. Not dark green. Major, Anyways, it was humanoid, practically sheet white, and it had its arms crossed in an X over its chest and, I think, a little bit over its face. The face in itself was problematic. It was like an opera mask, but more geometric or angular, which I guess is the better word to use here, with a sharp nose and this evil-looking toothy grin, not really sharp teeth. Anyways, my brother only saw a glimpse of it since he hadn't really been looking, but his girlfriend got a nice long look before she stumbled back and ran away, collecting my brother as they both returned to the camper together. We regrouped only for a second before deciding to investigate with me in tow this time. There was absolutely nothing there. Whatever it was, it simply appeared, terrified everyone present, and then vanished. Now, I'm afraid to go outside alone at night, which obviously isn't a smart idea anyways, especially given this is unfortunately not remotely the only thing that has led me to feel this way, but it just feels extra dangerous now because around any corner, there it could be. I usually don't have the safety of a companion with me. Who knows what it would have done if she had gone without my brother, for example. To further emphasize this point, if neither of my cats are out, I view them as guardian figures. The atmosphere outside can sometimes be so unsettling that I can't even walk 2 steps outside my house without feeling overwhelmed by dread. So I was curious. Is this something anyone else has seen? Or even heard of? We live in central New York, not the center of New York, that's upstate, and yeah, I don't understand why either, and the Great Lakes region is known for many things. Unfortunately, I've personally witnessed at least 5 such incidents. So I'm scared, yeah. We all kind of are. But we forget about it, especially in groups, until something like that happens. But before that, we had no reason to hallucinate, we were relaxed and having fun. And I am a discerning skeptic, I don't just take people's word. I'm always the one to ask, are you sure? And I always revisit the scene to verify details. I verify stories haven't changed. I had paranormal experiences as a teen. They changed my life. I had been wanting to share my experiences with the paranormal for some time but had been hesitant. I decided to go ahead and share my experiences in case it might be helpful to someone else. I grew up in a religious, non-denominational Christian household. I was born in a third world country and lived there for about 11 years. While I was there, I experienced many different paranormal events, so the concept of spirituality was more or less normal to me, as it is for most people where I come from. My dad has been a pastor of a church for longer than I have been alive. Many years ago, he was asked to move to the US to start a ministry, so we all moved stateside. I noticed that a lot of what seemed like normal spiritual occurrences stopped, whether they were at church or elsewhere. This lapse of spiritual occurrences, along with the usual negative side of religion, people problems, hypocrisy, made me lose faith, and I started dabbling in the usual teenage rebellious stuff like drinking and smoking weed. As I was doing this and living a double life at the church community I was at, I began to wonder if the spiritual was real at all. As a result, I ended up studying world religions to try to find the spiritual beliefs they held in common, assuming that all the politics and biases would fade away as all the common beliefs showed me the truth about spirituality. It was with this mindset that I made my way to study the occult. I started reading occult writings and performing rituals to try to see what they had in common with Christian beliefs. I believe that Satanism serves as an antithesis to Christianity, though opinions on this differ among individuals. If they had any common beliefs or thoughts on the mechanics of the spiritual, those things would have to be true, as they disagree in almost every other way. It was when I started reading these writings that the paranormal came back into my life in a big way. It began with the unusual shadows in my peripheral vision that vanished when I turned to look. I would feel anxious for no reason and feel like I was being watched. I started to feel afraid to be alone. I was 17 at the time. My fear gradually progressed into constant nightmares. Then I started to experience sleep paralysis. There was a shadow being at the foot of my bed. It was tall enough to go from the floor to the ceiling. The shape was that of a human in that it had 4 extremities and a head, but the proportions were not human. My room was in the basement with 2 very small windows that were mostly underground, so my room was dark enough that I could not see my hand until it was about 1.5 feet away from my face. Still, this being was darker to the point I could see its outline in the darkness. Whenever this being showed up, I would not be able to move or scream for help. I could move my eyes, but nothing more. Despite having grown very skeptical of my religious beliefs, I attempted to pray for help, but it didn't seem effective. It would take a while before the being would leave and I could move again. I recall waking up paralyzed and facing my bedside clock to watch the passing of time. It was over 20 minutes before I could move again. I saw that this being appeared between 2:30 and 3:30 a.m. most of the time. It was exactly 3:30 a.m. I was so scared that I would not even leave my bedroom to pee at night. I would use empty plastic water bottles to pee instead. I was playing lacrosse at the time, so I had cases of water that I would have in my car for after practice and games. I started to feel different negative emotions throughout the day without reason. I was not talking with anyone, and I felt alone. I was too embarrassed to talk to my dad, who I knew could help me. After a couple of nightmares, though, I asked my dad for help in the middle of the night, which was a wise decision. One of the nightmares I clearly remember basically involved me getting tortured in a weird way, but I could feel the pain. It was so vivid and painful that I checked my body for wounds when I woke up. The second nightmare, which made me ask for help, involved harming my family. The best way to describe the being is that it looked like Alma Wade, the antagonist from the Fear video game series. I don't remember seeing the game or any artwork before the nightmare, but there were many similarities. After I woke up from that, I realized I needed help, and I went upstairs to my parents' bedroom and told my dad I had a nightmare and needed prayer in my room. We went down and prayed together, and I was able to sleep the rest of the night. However, the visits from the dark being didn't stop then. The lack of sleep, the constant fear of being alone, the mounting pressure from being behind in school from sleeping in class and just not paying attention. I was taking 5 AP classes that year, and feeling helpless contributed to me wanting to end my life. At this point, I had partially found the answer I was seeking regarding the supernatural. I knew evil spirits existed, but I had not seen any good spirits. I wanted God to show himself this whole time, and so far he hadn't, despite my asking constantly. I planned to end self. I was about a week away, and I decided to go to a prayer meeting. I sat in the back by myself. I was not really there expecting to pray or anything. For some reason I just went. While I was there, I somehow ended up on my knees, and I just said to God, "Help me," in what I can only describe as the most sincere thing I have ever said. Immediately after I said that, I took an involuntary gasp of air. It was as if air made its way into my lungs, and I felt something leave my body. It was as if 90% of my weight lifted off. Tears immediately started flowing from my eyes, and I felt an overwhelming sense of joy. I knew something had happened, but I think I was happiest that this was the first sign I got that God was real. All desire to want to end my life immediately left me, and I had new hope. The dark being still visited me, but unlike before, I wasn't scared anymore. Even though I was paralyzed, I started to pray again to rebuke it in the name of Jesus in my mind, and the being would leave. It took a while at first, but I could see how day by day the being would leave quicker until I could basically pray and command it to leave, and it would. After these events, 3 things happened, one per night, that marked the end of the visits from the dark being. The first thing was an out-of-body experience I had with it. I had several out-of-body experiences while all these things happened to me, but nothing like this. There were 2 main kinds of experiences I had. One is where I could see my own body sleeping while somehow being able to see myself above my own body as well. It was like being in third person but looking at myself. The second, more common one I had was that I would again be in third person seeing myself, but I would be in a dark void. It wasn't black or scary, it was just emptiness. There was no floor or ceiling. No light, but I could see myself just fine. I was there that night, and, from what seemed very far away, this being was coming toward me. It was so far, all I could see was a dot at first, but the speed with which it was traveling was unlike anything I had seen in the material world. I didn't get a good look at it because everything happened so quickly, but I do remember seeing the creature in a black hood. As it approached me, it didn't seem to notice me until it was really close, and then when it lifted its head and saw me, it stopped immediately and turned around and left. I came back to after that, and I had tears in my eyes. I knew then that it was the last time I would see it. I thanked God and went back to bed. The second night I woke up facing the alarm clock. It was exactly 3:30 a.m. I was paralyzed, but only for what seemed like seconds. However, during my paralysis, something was whispering in my left ear. Something was whispering something in my left ear. It was a language I didn't understand, but it sounded ominous. I didn't see what it was, though. The third night I woke up, and I could see everything in my room. Normally it is pitch black, so I looked for a source of light but couldn't point it out. I sat and reclined on the back of my bed. As I was looking for the light, I started to hear a very low-pitched sound that increased in intensity until it was all I could hear. It sounded, to me, like the sound of an earthquake. I was about to jump out of bed to find cover, thinking it was an earthquake, but I noticed none of my stuff was moving. Then it was as if someone had redirected my attention to this one point in the room. All of a sudden, light started to beam out of it, and as the light got brighter, these translucent ribbons started to move around. These are the most difficult to describe, so I don't think I can do a good job here, but they looked kind of like the twirly ribbon things that dancers will sometimes use to make circles with the fabric, but they were translucent and moving on their own. They looked like how it looks when it's hot outside and you can see the top of the car have this translucent layer of distortion. This all eventually formed the shape of a man. Now, as soon as it became apparent to me that this was the shape of a man, my entire body shut down. I can't really explain it, except that it was as if someone hit the off button on my body and will, but I wasn't asleep. I was there, but my body was completely loose and my eyes were closed. From this moment on I just felt this being approach me, and as it got closer, I started to feel something like electricity run up and down my body. I felt an inexplicable joy, and tears started rolling down. It was the most powerful being I had ever felt. However, I didn't feel afraid. I knew this being was from God. I have been spiritually sensitive since then. I don't fully understand all that happened, but I became a sincere believer in the Christian faith since then and have had many other paranormal experiences. Early childhood was very strange in Wisconsin. I'm an avid believer in the paranormal and always have been, and I think I can attribute that to growing up, or at least spending the early half of my childhood, in a very strange house and neighborhood that some pretty weird stuff happened in. I lived in Kenosha, Wisconsin, until I was about 7. If I believe correctly, Wisconsin is a hotspot for the supernatural, which could have easily explained many of these things, I'm sure. They're nothing extravagantly terrifying or film-worthy, but they definitely will stick with me for the rest of my life. Here are some of the occurrences. First and foremost, I'm going to preface this matter by saying that it was factual that the previous owner of the house had ended himself. My mom was told this by our next-door neighbor, who had lived there for a while, shortly after we moved in, but he quickly retracted the statement, saying, well, he didn't kill himself in the house. 2. My mom had a digital radio in her bedroom on the dresser. I just remember being in there and noticing that it suddenly turned on by itself because I saw the blue numbers on the analog clock light up, and it wasn't on a second ago. As a 5 or maybe 6-year-old kid, I was only mildly confused by this. She was in the room at the time, I believe, and noticed it but somehow didn't freak out, which I later learned was because she didn't want to scare me by saying something or making a big deal of it. 3. This was an experience only I was witness to, but once I was sitting in the back seat of the car, I think in the parking lot of my grandma's apartment at night, and sort of just blankly staring at the streetlights when I saw this strange form pass underneath it real quick and then disappear. It wasn't the shape of a person or anything, just an abstract transparent figure. I didn't tell my brother or dad, who were waiting in the car with me, because I couldn't explain it as a 4-year-old, and I didn't feel particularly scared by it. I simply thought it was odd. Apparently, though, I did at one point tell my mom that I saw things in my room at night, because she mentions that to me whenever I say I don't recall actually seeing a ghost in the house. I don't, and little kids say creepy things all the time, but she thought this was additional proof of supernatural presence. I guess it could have just slipped my memory. She was insistent on that because she would rather not think she was going crazy and seeing things, and considering all the other strange stuff that happened, I really don't believe it was just her imagination. According to her, she would sometimes look over in the corner of the room when she woke up and see a shadowy figure sitting on the chair. But she emphasizes that the figure was not menacing at all and never tried to harm her, and that it looked sad, like it was hunched over in its seat looking down, not like an evil spirit but rather a lost soul that had nowhere to go after death. 4. Halloween was an incredibly popular holiday there, celebrated more than Christmas, which is likely why it's my favorite now and always has been, and because my birthday is the day before, which really was a bigger deal when I was a kid than it is now. Everybody went all out, yards full of witches and zombies, glowing orange lights decking the porches and roofs, giant inflatable jack-o'-lanterns, you name it. My mom would take me trick or treating around our neighborhood, and nothing particularly weird or creepy ever happened while we were out, but I do distinctly recall one unnerving thing. There was this one house we'd pass every year that had blood splattered on the door, and I don't mean the fake blood you get at a Halloween store, I mean like genuine, actual blood that came from something once living. Even the most realistic fake blood can easily be distinguished from the real thing, a fact that both my mom and I found frightening. Presumably, whoever lived at the house obtained it from a butcher, but I can't help but think just maybe there was a more sinister reason behind it. 5. People passing our house would habitually stop and stare. It wasn't that fancy a house, and we didn't have anything interesting or eye-catching outside, but any time anyone would walk by on the sidewalk, they would stop and stare at it for a moment before carrying on. To this day I have no clue what they could have been looking at, but it was certainly bizarre. 6. We would often see a man, well, a boy, really, in the area while heading out of our neighborhood when driving who was dressed in all black from head to toe, like an emo kid gone extreme. That wasn't in itself weird. What was weird was that there was this soulless emptiness in his eyes, unlike anything I had ever seen before and haven't seen since. It was like he was well and truly dead inside, not even strung out on drugs but instead a husk of a man whose body was being used as a vessel for something truly eldritch. It might not sound scary because it's hard to really put into words, but it's an image that has always stuck with me and my mom, who witnessed it as well. 7. There's probably a logical explanation somewhere for this one, but every night, I would be woken up around 3 to 4 a.m. to hear birds chirping outside my window while it was still pitch black night. It wasn't the kind of chirping you hear while, say, walking out in the woods. It was different than that. Louder, more aggressive. It freaked me out as a kid because I didn't think there were birds that chirped at those hours, and especially not ones that were that loud. 8. Our ceiling collapsed inexplicably one night. The house was not that old, and there was no significant damage we were aware of that would cause that to happen. That isn't scary and is pretty normal, I suppose, but the unsettling part was that it crumbled 1 second after my dog and brother passed under it, like it were timed and intended to hit one of them but narrowly missed. The house I live in was haunted, true story. This encounter is by far the spookiest experience my family and I have had regarding the paranormal. This is a long story, so I hope you find this interesting enough to read till the end. I am currently living in Australia, and this all started when I moved into my current house around 3 years ago. In my culture, we believe that whenever a family moves into a new home, a priest should come to perform various prayers to bless the house. However, when my mom bought the house, we immediately went on holiday for 3 months, so we were unable to perform the rituals. Everything started when we first came back to our house. Just some background, my mom raised me on her own, so it was just the two of us staying in the house at the time. I was still in high school, and my mom worked in the city, so we both took the train every morning. My mom always left home earlier than me, so it was my job to lock up every morning. My mom worked late almost every day, so I would get home first and be home alone for at least 5 hours every day. One morning as I left home, I began to feel paranoid that I had not locked the door, so I walked back to check it. The door was locked. Later that day when I came home from school, I walked up my driveway to find that the door was wide open. I freaked out, but I was brave enough to go inside. Our kitchen is pretty close to the entrance, so I grabbed a knife and searched the entire house. There was no one there. I decided not to tell my mom because she was really stressed with work, and I did not want her to freak out. Over the next few days, another weird thing started happening. Our garage door would start randomly opening whenever we were home. My mom was scared, but then we thought maybe our neighbor's garage remote functioned at the same frequency or something, and it was activating our door too. So, we dismissed it. It had been about 2 months since we were living in our new house, and everything seemed to be normal again. Until one day when I was awoken in the middle of the night by my mom. She looked super scared and asked me if I had come to her room to wake her up. I said no, I was half asleep and had no idea what she was rambling on about. She didn't believe me and made me swear that I hadn't. I always play scare pranks on my family, so that was why. I swore I didn't and asked her what was up. My mom is a super light sleeper, so while she was asleep, she heard someone prop her door open. She looked up and saw the figure of a boy and thought it was me. She asked it what's wrong and blinked. There was nothing there, and her door was still open. She called my name a few times, and there was no response, hence, she came to my room. I have to admit, given the stuff happening with the doors, I was kind of scared, but I convinced my mom that she was imagining things, and she went back to sleep. Ever since that night, up to this day, my mom still sleeps with her door open and the living room light on. And I do not blame her after what happened next. 2 weeks after this incident occurred, my mom's best friend and her son and daughter, they were both around my age, came over from our homeland, Malaysia, to visit us. I was really excited, as I have always been close to them. One thing you should know about my aunt is that she's had many experiences growing up with the paranormal, and so she is super scared of ghosts. For this reason, I and her kids always used to play pranks on her. One day the 4 of us were playing poker on the dining table while my mom was taking a nap in the living room. Suddenly my mom rushes out of the living room, her eyes are wide open, and she looks really scared. She asked her who had woken her up from her nap. The 4 of us were dumbfounded, as we had been playing cards the entire time. She then told us that she felt someone tap her shoulder while she was asleep. When she opened her eyes, there were 2 feet on the floor. Once again, she blinked, and the feet were gone, and there was no one there. My mom was full on freaking out now, especially after what happened the other night. Then my aunt, given how afraid she is of ghosts, started to freak out too. I didn't want her holiday to be ruined, so I managed to convince them that my mom was probably in the middle of a dream, so when she woke up, she was probably hallucinating. Yes, I know it sounds stupid, but hey, it worked. But then the next day, something else happened. My mom had gone to the shops to get groceries, and the kids and I were playing video games in the living room while their mom was having a shower. Suddenly we hear the bathroom door burst open, and out runs my aunt wrapped in her towel. She screamed at us, telling us to stop trying to scare us and that it wasn't funny. The 3 of us were super confused, and her daughter asked her what had happened. She told us that she knew that we were the ones knocking on the bathroom door even after she asked us to stop 3 times. I know it probably seems like she was overreacting, but I cannot emphasize how scared she is of ghosts. I exchanged a concerned look with her kids and then told her that it genuinely was not us and that we were playing FIFA, best game ever, the entire time. Soon my mom got home, and we told her what happened. Let's just say that my aunt started sleeping with her room lights on for the rest of her trip. Soon my aunt and her kids had gone home, and it was back to me and my mom again. We were back to our regular routine. My mom was finally at peace, and she had not seen anything for a while, apart from the garage door opening on its own every once in a while. The same, however, could not be said for me. It seemed that it had come to be my turn to be tormented. As I mentioned before with my mom at work, I would be home alone for a few hours every day. I began to start hearing things. The strange thing is that it would never happen while I was in the living room. Whenever I went to use the restroom or sat in my room, I would start hearing things coming from the living room and kitchen. It started out small. The sound of panting, akin to that of a marathon runner, was all that was heard. That kind of panting. But the minute I entered the living room, nothing. There was no sound at all. It soon started to get worse. I would hear footsteps pacing around outside my room and spoons and pots falling in the kitchen. But every time I stepped out into the living room, the noises would stop, and everything would be just as I left it. There was even a time when I thought I heard a kid laughing right outside the door when I was in the toilet. I decided not to tell my mom yet because she seemed to be getting over her experiences, and I did not want to scare her again. But one day I felt that I needed to tell her, and we decided that day it was time we contacted our priest to perform the prayers for our house. It was the day my best friend and his parents came over for dinner. It all started as an innocent dinner. My best friend and his family were Malaysian too, and we were having a great time talking about home while having a signature Malaysian meal. My friend's dad was telling us a story when all of a sudden, his face just froze, and his eyes widened. He honestly looked like he was having a stroke. His face contorted into a frown, and he just stared down at the table. My mom and I shared a worrying look, but my friend and his mom just continued eating like nothing was happening. Suddenly his dad seemed to return to us, and he continued telling the story as if nothing happened. But he could see that my mom and I looked worried. Suddenly his wife tapped his shoulder and said, "Just tell them." He frowned at his wife and just kept eating. There was an awkward silence for a few minutes, and then he finally decided to address the elephant in the room. He apologized for scaring us and assured us that there was no need to worry. He then went on to tell us about his life. Since he was a child, he had been very religious, and from a young age he felt a very close connection to God. He regularly meditated and was very, very spiritual. He was so spiritual that when he was in his mid-20s, he had awakened a gift. He was able to see dead people. I kid you not, when he said this, I immediately looked at my friend, waiting for him to start laughing at some prank. But my friend's face was dead serious, and he continued looking at his dad as he told his story. He told us that he could see them everywhere when he was walking his dog on the street, when he was sitting in the park, in people's houses, and even sometimes sitting on people who had been possessed. He said the spirits were drawn to him because they knew he could see them, and they would stalk him, begging him to help them reach the afterlife. He said there was simply nothing he could do because these people had died before their time and they would simply have to wait on Earth until it was their time. Back home, he was regularly contacted by people having paranormal experiences to perform a cleansing to drive evil spirits away. He told us about some of those experiences, but I don't think I should share them. He then asked us something that gave me chills. Have you guys performed prayers for your house yet? My mom refused to answer the question until he told her why he had asked that. He said that he did not want to worry us and that if we hadn't, we probably should. My mom continued to ask him why until he finally conceded. This is what he said: remember when I had that moment just now while I was talking? I had a visit. I won't tell you what it was, but it was the same spirit I saw standing at the front door when we came here. That's when my mom told him everything that had been happening. It is during this time that I decided to tell my mom about the things I had been hearing in the house. My friend's dad then told us that he did not think it was a malicious spirit, but to be safe, it was time for us to conduct the prayers for the house. Before he left, he asked my mom if he could see our altar in the prayer room. My mom took him to it, and we all followed him. As he stood in front of the altar, his body suddenly shook, as if he just had a huge hiccup. He then put his hands together and bowed his head. Before leaving, he said, "I can see why the two of you have not been hurt, you are both protected." That concluded their visit. A week later we arranged for a priest from our local temple to cleanse and bless our home. I promise you that ever since that day, nothing strange has ever happened in our house. Even the garage door has stopped opening on its own. I am not a particularly religious person, but I have learned my lesson. I will never move into a new house without performing the rituals that my culture demands.